the undergraduate students who would be reading these texts from different states of India, and not from West Bengal, even, from the Far East, like Arunachal Pradesh, who knows, from South India. And as the time passes, we never know. We'll be reading more from authors hailing from Bangladesh or from Sri Lanka, from Pakistan, from the SAARC countries or the South Asian countries. I think that would be an amazing exercise in that sense, because European universities are opening up their curriculum and the syllabus, allowing and accommodating texts which are not at all part of their cultural momentum. They're allowing Indian text, other South Asian text, Far East Asian text as part of their curriculum. So I think it's a good beginning in that sense, that we have a change in the curriculum, in the syllabus. And because of that, we are being able to allow and to accommodate different textual representations which were unthinkable during my time. I mean, I can't think of having text from Arunachal Pradesh, or maybe from Nepal, or from Tamil Nadu, or from Sikkim, doing the rounds in the syllabus. It was predominantly Anglophonic, Euro-American during my time. But the post-colonial is quite old. I mean, these theorizations about the Eurocentric bias in the curriculum is nothing new. The scholars like Edward Said and all the other founding members of the post-colonial theoretical exercise, like P. Lascroft and others, they all started questioning the canon in that way. They began critiquing this overpresence of the Euro canon or the Anglophonic canon in the syllabus. For example, as I jokingly say all the time with my friends, that we all are familiar about birds like the churui and the shalik and the kak and other birds, but we are subjected to read the nightingale in the sky, like whom we never saw in our lifetime. So this coercion and this compulsion of the syllabus to read something that we have never experienced, and this rupture and this dislocation from the life world that we embed on. So we live in this situation, in this climate of Bengal. Many of us are maybe coming from outside Bengal. We are in that way exposed to the kind of geographical varieties that we witness from our childhood. None of them figure in the syllabus. That's a pity, and that's a big tragedy for us. And it took decades for us to understand and to realize that the syllabus needs to be changed. But better late than never. So it's a good shift in that sense, this transition from the Anglophonic, from the Euro-American to the Indian, to the post-colonial, is definitely a welcome move. But having said that, within the post-colonial, there are certain issues that are to be raised, and these are very important issues. And there, the politics of the hyphen comes into the consideration. And allow me to share some slides so that it would help you to figure out what exactly I'm trying to talk about. And that would help me to situate my argument in a better way as well. So if you are able to, could you please confirm whether my screen is visible to everyone?
Yes, sir, it is perfectly visible.
Thank you. So the title, as it was mentioned in the introductory note, is quite consciously done. And as I said, it's not new, but I decided to bring in the concept of the fragments because this is necessary. From our childhood, we are, grilled with this idea of integrity. India united among all its diversity, unity in diversity, blah, 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 all these kind of stuff. We are subjected to listen to all these hegemonic concepts of unity, totalitarian ideas of a composed, unified India. And anyone talking about differences are nowadays immediately branded as anti-Indian or anti-national, etc., etc. So therefore, in this hegemonic notion of the Unitarian, in this totalitarian notion of the unified monolithic India, we seldom talk about the fragments. In fact, there is no fashion to talk about the fragments. And the same goes with the canon. There is a politics of canon making because someone or some people at the boardroom decide the syllabus. And they have the last and the final say about the syllabus and about the curriculum. So they decided that in this syllabus, these would be the figures whom we will read. So therefore, there is a politics of misrepresentation and underrepresentation as far as the syllabus goes. I think this much could be understood by everyone who are present here. Therefore, I decided to title it in this way, that the canon is to be situated at the side of its fragments. So I think we have reached that situation where we need to celebrate the fragments. We need to talk about the fragments. And once we talk about the fragments, definitely we are talking about the micro narratives. We are, taught and we are trained to celebrate the meta narratives, big texts, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, all this meta-textual world. We are always subjected to talk about that. We are trained, we are grilled to imagine our spaces, our imaginary world in the light of all this metatextual, hypertextual world of the epics and the majoritarian ideas of Indian culture, etc., etc. The micro narratives hidden behind these majoritarian hegemonic textual universe are barely present and are seldom talked of. That's why it is necessary when we are doing post-colonial studies without the hyphen to talk about the micro narratives. Because 1947, when we celebrated the independence, we thought and we were told that now it is a new slate, that we begin with a new slate. It's absolutely a new beginning, a big rupture. So therefore, the question arises that are we talking about the politics of the hyphen within the rubric of the post-colonial? And are there issues of the ideologies of the majoritarian? Are there discontinuities or continuities? Are there questions of contestations and conflicts on the question of representations? Are we representing all voices in the syllabus? Are we representing all the cultures, all the regional varieties of India? The answer is certainly no. So therefore, this idea and this paradigm that post-1947, the midnight children were free and they were asked to begin anew on a new slate is perhaps something that is to be taken with a pinch of salt. Because is it a fact that the midnight children arrived on the scene after the departure of the British as the new king? So that has to be looked into. And post-colonial, without the hyphen, actually raises this question. Because the moment you put the hyphen, you are making a temporal rupture. You are suggesting that pre-1947, and the 1947 is the temporal marker that marks the end of the colonial rule. And now begins the egalitarian, equality-oriented era where all of us are equal. Amra shobai raja, amaderi rajar rajotte. Is that the case? That is the question that post-colonial, without the hyphen, raises. And that's a very important question. Because the question that is raised by the theorists of post-colonial without the hyphen is that do we have a rupture post-1947, or do we have a continuation of the same, power structure, the power relations? Do you have a reification of the same power relations? That means the hierarchic structure of Indian society, does it remain the same, or do we witness, or do we experience the necessary restructuring of Indian society? So when you say post-hyphen colonial, then you are making that much vaunted claim that Come 1947, everything is over. All the coercive mechanisms, the dominations, all the discriminations, the misrules, the questions of injustice, social injustices, all these are over. We are all now equal. The Indian constitution is there. So that rule book is there and we are free. But that doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. And the proponents of post-colonialism without the hyphen suggest that no, that is not exactly the case, because 1947 marks the beginning of the continuation of those same structures of power. The Britishers are over, they are gone, but the new king are there. Raja Shajai, Lal Jamagai, Nil Jamagai, but the same power structure remains. So therefore, the post-colonial is not the exact theoretical proposition. It is to be replaced by the idea of the post-colonial without the hyphen, because there is a politics of the hyphen, because the hyphen occludes, the hyphen erases the hidden structures of power. Therefore, the poet in the vernacular, the poet in different regional areas raised this fundamental question that do we call this a country of our own, which is experiencing death and destruction and injustice and violence every other day. And therefore, one of the Bengali poets, Navarun Bhattacharya, so famously raised this point when he mentioned these questions in his celebrated text published in the 1970s, when India was experiencing political violence in the form of the Naxalite movement and other movements in different regions of India, called A Mrittu Pottaka Amar Desh Noy. So if 1947 happens to be a glorious momentum that provides that rhythm of freedom, and we are on a, that momentum to begin in a new way, then how come that a poet calls and describes this country a Mrittu Pottaka? So I don't call this country my country if it is doing injustice to the Dalits, if it is doing injustice to the women, if it is doing injustice to the tribals, if it is doing injustice to the minorities, if it is continuing the same power relation of majoritarianism. So therefore, a Mrittu Pottaka, I don't call this country my own if it is throwing up only regular doses of violence. And therefore, I think I wanted to make you understand the majoritarian. Unless you understand this political economic issue, you will not be able to understand the absence of the minor voices in the syllabus and the over-presence of the majoritarian, the hegemonic forces in the syllabus. So therefore, you have to understand as young scholars, as budding scholars, and this is also to my colleagues in this college and to all the other colleagues listening. I'm a part of all of you. So we, teachers, the faculty members, we also forget this when we take up the task and the responsibility to constitute the syllabus and the curriculum, because there is always a problem of underrepresentation, misrepresentation, and misrecognition or non-recognition in various ways. In fact, what we forget is that there is a world system of curriculum formation. Waldstein has theorized this idea of world system theory. And the world system talks about the presence of the Anglophonic. The capitalist system has also popularized anything and everything from the West. And we have just jumped onto that bandwagon without questioning it. And therefore, the political economics of textual presence is also very important, because we just blindly follow the syllabus without analyzing and examining the different layers of politics of misrepresentation within the syllabus itself. And therefore, as I said moments back, that there is a politics of occlusion or erasure of the weaker, quote unquote, weaker or the minor text. You do not come across a brilliant text like A Mrittu Pottaka Amar Desh Noy in our syllabus, although it's a perfect example, a great specimen of post-colonial without the hyphen text. Because it is written in the Bengali language, that's why we hesitate to refer to that. More and more translation works are necessary, and more we, the faculty members, as well as the scholars, need to refer and to engage with these wonderful vernacular texts. And we need to, we need to put it into the center. We need to make it the mainstream. So the peripheral is to be mainstreamed in that way. What is happening right now is that there is a predominance of the Hindi belt and there is a supremacy of the English. So that same old logic of the white man's legacy continues. So the colonial hangover is very much there. And to borrow Derrida, there is a monolingualism, and also very importantly, there is a monodisciplinarianism of the syllabus, which is the other name of majoritarianism. Now, what do I mean by monolingualism? As I said in the very previous line, that there is a bigger presence of the Hindi belt, translations of those famous names, Indian English writers, and very big names. You do not come across names like Omyo Bhushan Majumdar from North Bengal. You do not come across names of Nepali writers or writers from Tripura, writers from Lakshadweep, or writers from Tamil Nadu or Kerala, etc., Kashmir for that matter. So now, recently, there are new research is being carried out on Kashmiri literature, Kashmiri poetry, poetry from Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, various other regions from Africa, other SAARC countries, etc. So there is a growing monolingualism of the syllabus. The syllabus is heavily tilted in favor of a certain language, and there is a supremacy of the English language. And that's why, along with that, there is another problem, and the problem is the monodisciplinarianism. This is, I think, very, very important. I very often come across questions like this, that what kind of work do you do? This is not literature. I'm often asked by many of my colleagues and friends that the kind of research that you are doing is not what we call pure literary research. Now, this is really funny, because all the great, theorists in the domain of post-colonial studies engaged with sociology, economics. In fact, the very premise of colonialism is embedded on the idea of the economic plundering of the third world, of the global south. So therefore, unless and until I understand the political economy of colonialism, unless and until I understand the social engineering that the colonial masters did during their long tenure as colonial governance, act of colonial governance in India and in other parts of the global south, how can I do justice to the question of the post-colonial? So I have to understand the history of colonialism, the economics of colonialism, the sociology of colonialism, the cultural understanding, the cultural bearings and outcomes of colonialism, the religious outcomes of colonialism. Unless and until I understand all these things, I cannot claim to do proper justice to the question of colonialism or post-colonialism. Therefore, students who are doing post-colonial studies must understand that this is a classic case of interdisciplinary studies. It is very fashionable to talk about cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary dialogues, but very few of us would actualize it in our real life practices. So please keep this in mind, that you have to open up. You have to embrace other disciplines. You cannot restrict yourself only what we call quote unquote literary studies. There is nothing called literary studies, because literature itself is beholden to the larger life world. So unless I connect and unless I embed it to the larger life world, I cannot do justice to it. Therefore, post-colonialism itself is a wonderful specimen of cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary dialogue. And unless we do that, we cannot continue our engagement in post-colonial studies. So please keep that in mind. Now, having said that, let us get back to what I was talking of in the beginning, that if 1947 is the momentous moment in that way, that moment of rupture, the moment of a beginning, right? So that was the moment of euphoria, an amazing moment of history that Nehru talked about, the tryst of history in that way, that we are beginning in a new way as a new nation. If that be the case, And why is it that India, as things unfolded, the partition happened, many people died. Then, as time passed on, we have other incidents of different, movements, confrontations, classes. Something that V.S. Naipaul kept in mind when he talked of or described India as million mutinies now. India, a land which has experienced million mutinies on different issues, on language, on regional rights, on cultural rights, group rights, different issues. So people are fighting with each other on different issues. Now the question is, it is very easy to say that they are separatist, they are anti-national, they are seditious, blah, blah, blah. But we have to, as scholars, as post-colonial scholars, we have to understand that this is the moment of the post-colonial. Because so far, we haven't addressed this. But this is the post-colonial moment to address and to engage with this question of million mutinies. These mutinies are happening because the power relations have remained the same. And therefore, these mutinies expose and open up and unfold questions of misrecognition and non-recognition that I mentioned. So therefore, the bottom line is, and as I have jokingly said, that the post-colonial is actually the political. It's political here in that way that we have to understand that this is not a case of goody-goody armchair theories that we read this much of Edward Said, that much of Robert Young, and that much of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and that makes the syllabus, and that is how it is. It's not. It's very much connected to the life world, to the world that we inhabit, to our everyday issues, the quotidian, the political, the social, the cultural, the religious. All these issues snowball and intrude into our home. We cannot ignore them. So theories of the post-colonial is actually emanating from the ground, is actually emerging from the ground reality that we are inhabiting every day. And the classroom and the syllabus and the pedagogic models that we follow needs to be situated within that worlding itself. So let us situate the syllabus within the world. And as Said talked of secular criticism, and Heidegger talked of worlding the text, something that Edwards had also said, the critic, the world, and the text. Remember Said's famous formulation. So both the critic, the text, and the world are interconnected. We cannot dissociate each other. Our theories are to come from our life world. And therefore, we have to listen to the souls of the minor folks. W.E.B. Du Bois is famous for writing the book, The Souls of the Black Folks. So I just toyed with that title and said that the post-colonial, or any hypothesis about the post-colonial, induces and inspires us to listen to the souls of the minor folks. Now, when I use the word minor, I use it very consciously. I'm not talking about minor in the sense of one religious category. The minor suggests minority in related minority, regional minority, cultural minority, etc., etc. So the post-colonial is this. And that's why there is a claim that if I read T.S. Eliot, why don't I read Mamang Dai from Arunachal Pradesh? Or maybe if I listen to this particular singer, why not Naran Gopal from Nepal? Why not other singers from other places of India? Why only one homogeneity of presence in the syllabus, in the cultural front? Why this monolingualism? And therefore, we have to understand, if we unfold it further and expand it further, we have to understand that the discussion that we are having is pointing towards the responsibility of the post-colonial state. Because remember, the post-colonial state forms the UGC, it forms the syllabus committee, it forms different university rules and regulations. So it is, after all, the post-colonial state which was born after 1947. So as young students, young scholars, and all of us colleagues in the Department of Literature in English, I don't call it in that way, English literature, literatures in English in that sense, and that is more accommodative in that sense. So if colleagues in the Department of Literatures of English are really serious about doing the post-colonial, then you have to understand the dynamics of the post-colonial state. Because the post-colonial state did not allow a complete restructuring of the social structure and the structures of power in India. And this is what I meant by post-colonial as an interdisciplinary realm. Look at this. I have named here Sudipta Kaviraj, Ranajit Guha, Rajani Kothari, and Gayatri Spivak, and many others are hidden within these, headings. All these people are either political scientists or historians, or as Spivak herself describes, Spivak describes herself in an amazing way as Marxist feminist deconstructionist. So this is again an interdisciplinary signifier in that sense. So anyone doing the post-colonial must begin from the beginning, and the beginning is the post-colonial state. It was entrusted with the responsibility to change the social structure. It failed. Why? Because it did not resort the method of complete restructuring. It adopted the model of passive, what Sudipta Kaviraj and many other members of the subaltern studies group describes as passive revolution. So they didn't break the social structures of India in a significant way. It was not a momentous restructuring of Indian social structures. The social structures were kept the same. The caste structures were retained. The religious structures were retained. The economic structures of Indian society were retained. So the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor, the middle class, all these structures were maintained. And the policy that was adopted was a policy of passive revolution, not an active revolution. And what was achieved, what was thought of achieving was a hegemony of new ideas. But what was actually happening was domination without hegemony. This is the famous statement by subaltern studies historian Professor Ranajit Guha, that in India, we didn't have hegemony of a progressive idea, hegemony of new ideas. Rather, we had domination without hegemony, domination of one group of ideas. And that group of ideas was proliferated by those people who were in power at that time. And the system that we adopted was the system of patron-client in the political realm, that some leaders will be there. We will be going to them, you are our my bap, you are the best, you are our everything, you are the God. So they will say, yes, I am there, I am the neta, I am the leader, I will do everything for you. And you just cast your votes for me. And this is the patron-client system that we systematized and institutionalized in India, according to Professor Rajani Kothari. So unless and until we understand these things, we cannot understand the post-colonial, because these are the hard political issues that actually happen in India, and we are all experiencing the fallout of that. Now, therefore, the post-colonial state, I'm sorry because of the typo there in the state. So the post-colonial state remained the comprador state, because the power structures were retained by the elite classes in Indian society, the upper caste, the upper class. They, retained the power post 1947. So it was a continuation of the same elitism that we experienced during the British rule. So the Britishers were elite. They controlled our life space. They left, and then the upper class and the upper caste, they retained the power. So Indian post-colonial state emerged as the comprador state. These ideologies of the benevolent post-colonial state, the welfare state, these things came up, but then it was not completely put into practice. And therefore, as a result of all these things, the subaltern couldn't speak. And if the subaltern couldn't speak, then what the syllabus would be? The syllabus would be a syllabus for the elites, by the elites, for the elites, and of the elites. And that is exactly what the syllabus was. So it was populated with those big names, the Anglophonic names, and the subaltern was nowhere in the scenario. So therefore, the legacy of the brown skin and the white mask continued. And what we had was a complete Bhadralok culture and Bhadralok historiography, elite canon, and complete hegemony of the upper class and the upper caste, as I said. And this cultural and literary Brahmanism created the problem of literary canon formation. This is the famous book by John Guillory, and this is talking about the problem of literary canon formation. So if we have a cultural upper casteism and upper classism, cultural majoritarianism, then you can well imagine what is going to happen in the syllabus. You have a big fight to make to include text from Dalit studies. You have a lot of struggle to do to accommodate text from different regions of India. So that is the problem that post-colonial scholars confront. But these are the questions that post-colonial scholars raise. And because of that, even though it is slowly changing, it is changing. And that's why I said in the very beginning, it's a welcome change. And therefore, if that be the case, whatever we discussed, the nation or the canon and its fragments are to be understood. And we have to celebrate the fragments, because the fragments are the subaltern voices. They were suppressed and oppressed and repressed. And therefore, we have to deflate all derivative discourses. All the kind of discourses that we celebrate are derivative discourses. We derive it from different hegemonic sources. People say that, that's why I do it. People do that, that's why I do it. Celebrities do that, that's why I do it. So we don't have a thinking culture in the department, in the corridors of the academy, where we question where apparently there is no question. This is where critique is born. And post-colonialism welcomes this birth of critique. So this is the moment of critical theory. And post-colonialism itself is an emanation of that critical theoretical exercise to question the nation, to question the fragments, to question the canon, to question whatever is derived, whatever is given to us, something that is pre-given that we never question. The idea of the post-colonial is to question the pre-given. And therefore, Partha Chatterjee's famous book, The Nation and Its Fragments, talk about colonial and post-colonial histories. So colonial histories have its hangover in post-colonial histories. We need to address that. Otherwise, we'll not be able to retain and to accommodate the minor fragment or the small voices. So when Ranajit Guha, the subaltern studies historian, talked about the small voices of history, he is actually hinting at the small voices of all other disciplines, the small voices of literature. That means the fragments of literature, the canon and its fragments, right? So the canon is majoritarian, the canon is hegemonic, whereas it suppresses and represses those small voices of history. And it is our responsibility as the subaltern studies historians did to restore the small voices, to retain the small voices, to give them their due recognition. And the motto and the agenda for the post-colonial, therefore, is subalternization or vernacularization, because that is the exact responsibility that we have. And that's why we need to provincialize the canon. The canon is at the center. We need to push it to the periphery. And we need to ask this question. I mean, allow me to say this, and I apologize for saying this, but I think the time has come for us to ask this question: what the hell is Indian writing in English? I'm really fed up with this terminology, Indian writing in English. I think the time has come for us to coin new ideas, new terminologies, because it's high time that we bring regional text to the table. We bring regional text to the syllabus. And therefore, we need to decenter the elite club of authors. I mean, I salute Raja Rao, I salute Mulk Raj Anand, I salute Amitabh Ghosh, fine. I give them my due respect. But then enough has been done by them. It's high time that we bring in new faces, new voices who are waiting in the waiting rooms of syllabus, right? So Dipesh Chakraborty, in his famous book Provincializing Europe, has used this idea of waiting rooms of history. So in the waiting rooms of syllabus, these great voices like Navarun Bhattacharya, Mamang Dai, and many others, right? Many other writers are waiting. It is high time that we accommodate them. We allow them to come in. Enough with these big names, and therefore can it be a bad idea to province world the peripheral? Because the peripheral is always kept in the province. What about worlding it and bringing it to the center stage? So that's my provocative question to all of you. That is it a fact that the province is always pushed to the periphery? Is it necessary for all of us to bring it to the center without, retaining this binary of the center and the periphery? Because the moment we allow this provincial text to come to the center, we break the center periphery binary. And therefore, if we accept that and if we agree with that agenda, then we need to focus on the pathfinders of South Asia, the macro vision of the micro narratives. This would be the agenda then. And the fragments would be the new canon, figuratively put. And the MLA Roundtable in 2019 had a wonderful session on regional world literature. So you see, things are changing. Even the MLA in America, they are having roundtables on regional world literature. So they are recognizing the necessity of regional literature, and they're claiming that world literature is not just Tagore and Goethe and those big names, the celebrities. The regional literary texts are also potent with and equipped with all the claims of world recognition. So we need to recognize the micro narratives and the big little world of little mags. This is what I have coined in that way. Brihat Khudro Potrika. We call them the Khudro Potrika, Anushtup, Bhorer Alo, Ebong Shaira. There are many little magazines. Maybe there are little magazines. There are many little magazines I know from North Bengal, from Central Bengal, from South Bengal, from the hills, and from other places. We call them the little mags. Time has come to talk about the bigness of these little mags, because they are our treasures. They have allowed our regional writings, the real writings, to flourish, to continue. We have never paid any attention to them. You see, all these great names, Dipesh Chakraborty, Partho Chatterjee, Gayatri Spivak, Professor Arindam Chakraborty, they regularly write in these little magazines because they are the treasures of our local, regional writings, the life world that we inhabit. How can we ignore it? I mean, we have no issues to know about the cultures which is near to our life. And we are talking about European culture, we are talking about Victorian culture, we are talking about romantic culture. Fine, I mean, we need to know about them. I'm not talking about a strict sense of provincialism. What I'm talking of is, let us pay equal attention to it. And therefore, it's time to talk of the minor text, Perumal Murugan, One Part Oman. This book created a lot of controversy. It's time that we talk about figures like Mamandai, Perumal Murugan, and also 1922 happens to be the publication of Nazrul's Bidrohi and T.S. Eliot's The Westland. Now, people talk about the Westland so much. Even I feel ashamed of the fact that I studied the Westland when I was a student, but I never knew that in 1922, Nazrul's Bidrohi was also published. So it is the same year we talk about this big meta text of the Westland, but we do not pay any attention to Bidrohi. Yes, the Bengali literature department people would pay attention to Bidrohi. Why only Bengali department people? Why not we in the Department of English? Because we are, after all, doing literature. And therefore, it is our responsibility that we make a conjunctive reading of both the Westland. That's why I put Bidrohi in the beginning and Westland next. So both the texts are marking their centenaries of publication in 2021. So our university is celebrating these two world literary milestones, but we need to, this is just an example. There are many other texts. There are many other texts that we do not talk of. And therefore, this project of the post-colonial must recognize the importance of these texts. And when we are talking about the Westland, simultaneously, we should also talk about Bidrohi, many other texts. Bidrohi changed Bengali literature. It is a modern voice in post-Tagorian Bengali literature. Similarly, the Westland changed British literature. So they should be given equal respect. But we talk about the Westland, we talk about the Golden Bough, Jesse Weston, Fraser, the cultures in Europe, all these things, fine, we need to do that. But it never occurred to us that we should also bring in a text which was published in the same year. We talk about Wilfred Owen, we talk about Rupert Brooke, we talk about the war poets. We do not talk about Nazrul, who was also in the cantonment in Karachi during the First World War. So this is what we need to do. We need to go for a conjunctive readings of different literary milestones, and that would help us to unmake the hegemon. When we talk about the Bloomsbury group, we should also talk about the Kollol Juger Kobi from Bengal. They were doing poetry in the 1930s and early 1920s, late 1920s. So why don't we talk about them as well? It is the responsibility of the post-colonial scholar that they would do that. I'm not opening the link because this is the link of the essay that I have written on both the Bidrohi and the Westland that you can read if you are interested later. But this is what my argument is, and this is the last slide in that way. If I could make my point clear to all of you, and if the politics of the hyphen is understood by all of you, then the answer is to decolonize theory, to understand that the non-Europeans can also think. We can also think. The regional writer can also write. The vernacular writer can beat and can, surpass some of those great, so-called great European writers as well. So it is high time that we decolonize our derivative discourses. We decolonize our theoretical ideas, our theoretical a prioris, and we set our standards, restructure our ideas. And once we do that, then I think we can do real post-colonial studies without the hyphen. So therefore, let's celebrate the fragments, the small voices. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful deliberation, which actually, in a brief time and space, had set in motion the divergences and dispersals appropriately termed as the fragments. In the same thread, you have connected literature and its canon with the post colonial state, which perfectly opens the space for interdisciplinary dialogue. Now, this is a thing that many of us has faced, that many a times what happens is while teaching, we often face a question from our students relating to the relevance of literature. I believe this talk today comes as an eye opener for them, and from now on, in reading of literature, both the minor and the mainstream, they will read through a politically conscious lens. I also believe that they will actually move beyond the premise of the mainstream literatures and search for or have a keen eye for the minor literatures that evolve or emerge out of the provincial towns, the suburbs that we live in. This was actually a very, very wonderful deliberation, and it was enriching not only for the students but also for the faculties. Thank you, sir. In our next talk, we'll move from the general to specific. We'll move into a fragment of the whole, because our next speaker, who happens to be an extended family member of the Department of English, Ananda Chandra College, will take us into a word ride into the Northeast. Our semester 4 student, Ankita, will introduce us with our next speaker for the day. Thank you.
Every conversation counts, especially when we enjoy the privilege of hearing an enthusiastic academic and a scholar. She is not new to us. We have already witnessed the energy and youthfulness that she radiates some 2 years back in the International Creative Writing Workshop, Ink and Paper, Kagoj or Column, that the department had organized. So today we are again honored and happy to have Dr. Shanjukta Chatterjee, Associate Professor, Department of English at Raiganj University, to speak to us on Mamang Dai and the Indian Postcolonial. She is our second speaker for the day. Dr. Shanjukta Chatterjee has an academic experience of about 18 years and is the director of the Center for Women's Studies at Raiganj University. She has another identity, and that is of a social activist and worker. Her research interest includes post-colonial studies, feminisms, Indian classical studies, Northeast studies, and many more. She has also penned a number of articles that have been published in a number of journals or in books published by reputed publishing houses. To name a few, her article, Of Aliens and Natives, a psychoanalytic reading of Satyajit Roy's short stories, was a part of the book Cultural Dialogues, Context and Crossroads in 2019. The article, Cultural Othering and Neo-Colonization in Kiran Desai's The Inheritance of Loss, and the article of Davies and Dasis, Reading the Bratakalthas of Bengal as Space of Marginalized Feminine Pietism, were published in second volume and third volume of the journal Exposure respectively. Very recently, her article Stigma and Fear During COVID 19, Essentializing Religion in an Indian Context, got published from Springer Nature. These are just a few of the titles, and I am actually super excited to be given an opportunity to hear her. And I believe so are you all. So I will keep my mouth shut for now and would like to welcome on screen our second guest speaker, Dr. Shanjukta Chatterjee. Ma'am, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for saying yes to this webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I should begin with, a big bunch of thanks to uh, Principal Ananda Chandra College, Oshima, Shiv Shankar, and everyone I had met there during the creative writing workshop because um, I am I am just a neighbor. I'm from Shiliguri, basically, though I work at Raiganj. And the moment I came to know that this is for the students, for the people who we are actually looking forward to teach us actually more things, newer things, and better things. So I just am here to hold a torch. It's not really, something very objective or something that you'll find it a very like a you know professional kind of thing, but it's just a talk between you and me, you on the other part of the screen, the other side of the screen, the border that I so dislike, but I have to due to the pandemic, and it's about things that I want to share with you. See, the topic of my lecture today, my talk today, is Mamandai and the Indian Postcolonial. So for the students, for you there who really, I don't know if you know, but there is a very important book by Alec Pomar and Rosinka Chaudhary of the same name. And when I was thinking, what should be the title of talk? I don't like having titles of talk, but I think it should be like, that's one thing we should again do away with. I feel. I mean, the title of talk is kind of so bracketing and so restrictive that you just can't go beyond that. So I thought that maybe I can, have a discussion about Mamangdai and the Indian post-colonial. And then I thought, no, it should be Mamangdai in the Indian post-colonial. And then I thought, no, Mamangdai, colon, the Indian post-colonial. So I kept on thinking of the various variations, the changes that I could make when I was preparing the title. And the reason behind that has been explained in the previous wonderful lecture by Professor Anindo Purakayasto, who actually spoke what I am going to speak now. He spoke, he said, why, what is the need? And when he was showing a picture of the Legends of Pensam by Mamangdai, my heart went out. So it is so very important to understand that why, this kind of categorization exists till date and why we are so much bound by these invisible, walls that actually restrict us from doing anything new, anything different. And that is why this entire exercise of talking on the premises of post-colonial literature should be done regularly and should be encouraged even within the classroom. When we are talking about certain texts, we should go beyond that text, and we should talk about the text that perhaps the stories that have come up in Uttar Bongo Sangbad or in or in Anandabajar Potrika. Anandabajar is widely circulated. Uttarbanga Sangbad is much, I feel, less that way. Lesser people read that because I remember that when I had moved to Raiganj, even people said that you come from Shiliguri, so you are fond of reading Uttarbanga Sangbad. So I said, no, no, there's nothing like that. No, no, that's the reason. So, these kind of like differentiations happen that you when you profess that you are associated with a certain way of thinking or a certain way of life. So the Indian post-colonial, it is kind of an adumbrated homogeneous bracketing, and that has actually been kind of uh, a legacy that started with branding us as the third world. So the post-colonial trajectory of thinking, this entire gamut, I think, stands accused when I decide upon the topic. And the insignificant micro narrative that stands boldly against this grand narrative of post-colonial Indian English literature that I too dislike. I mean, this kind of this entire monolithic kind of a projection. Just against that, you can have people like Mamandai who are writing not uh, from the periphery, because first time I heard of Mamandai, what I did was to take down the map of India, and then I went and I saw where is Arunachal Pradesh. I knew Arunachal Pradesh is in the northeast. I'll talk about that later. But then I took down the map and I saw that Arunachal Pradesh is really very far. That is what I thought. And then I saw where are the Mishmi Hills, because in Black Hill she keeps on speaking about Mishmis and Khampis and tribes like that. So I went and saw where are the Mishmi Hills, and I saw that they are on the extreme right hand side, if I may say, of the map as I put it down the India map. And then I thought that okay, so Mamandai is writing from the border, and then I chastised myself. I said this is wrong. You should not be thinking like that, because what are the borders? Who taught you these are the borders? The British. They are the ones, and they are the ones who are continuously who were continuously relegating these people, trying to approach them and then bordering them off. So even with this term, northeast studies, what with the centers for northeast studies opening at various universities, it has been opened at various universities across the country. The signifier, if I may say, northeast itself is very problematic. It is natural that in a country that is ruled from a Hindi heartland, from where all the far-flung areas must appear as bundles of impenetrable tracts of knowledge, systems, and beliefs, and all. It is natural that we'll be called, northeast or the far east or whatever. But northeast is there. Interestingly, we don't have zones like northwest or something extreme west. So because Delhi is nearer, so that kind of distancing is much less out there. In other words, it would have been an easy task on the part of the authorities in power to describe zones such as South India. That is another bracketing that goes on, another labeling. Okay, South India. Similarly, the Northeast, and so we don't have any kind. We don't have the individual representation acknowledged. The Northeast was actually a geopolitical terminology, okay, that was coined by the British administration. Sir Alexander Mackenzie, who served as the Chief Commissioner of the British Crown colony of Burma from 1890 to 1895, and as the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal from 1895 to 1898, used the term Northeast Frontier. He meant Assam and the adjoining hill areas, and the princely states of Tripura and Manipur in his book. The title of the book was History of the Government with the Hill Tribes of the Northeast Frontier of Bengal, and it was published in 1884. Later, in 1890s, when there was a plan to merge Eastern Bengal and Assam, there were proposals to name the new province Northeastern Province. After the separation of Burma from the Indian subcontinent in 1937 and then the independence of India in 1947, the zone beyond Bengal remained as the referred Northeast. So the name stuck like that. The region got geographically more or less isolated. All the more isolated, I should say, all the more isolated after two political events. One, Chinese occupation of Tibet, and the second one, virtual closure of the border with Burma. Udayan Mishra has written in The Periphery Strikes Back, Challenges to the Nation State in Assam and Nagaland. He writes, one has to recognize that there are many different communities in the region, and the dynamics of each single movement have to be taken care of if any solution is to be achieved. Solution to what? Solution to the repeated insurgencies, to the uprisings, to the various problems that are never resolved completely. And recently, I'm sure all of you are aware of the Chinese aggression that's going on, and all the other kinds of problems that these people situated in Arunachal Pradesh have to face. And on top of that, they are, instead of being dealt with, the problems of Arunachal Pradesh or the problems of Mizoram or the problems of Nagaland, what the center has been doing is they have been very happy in, clubbing these seven states together. And you know what are the seven states that we call the seven sisters? Of course, I'm sure you know Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram, and Tripura. And we are, we actually look at them. They're clubbed together and they are viewed as a separate entity. And dialogues with any one insurgent group is considered to be satisfactory to curb all kind of civil or other kind of uprisings in the area. So, how can you really solve the problems? I should not really be saying this that in the recent past there have been movements. There have been political people traveling all the way to Arunachal Pradesh and all that. But till very recent times, it was not there. And definitely, when we talk about Arunachal Pradesh, we must remember that its history, its political history. Okay, it was called the NEFA, Northeast Frontier Agency, and it became the 24th state of the country in 1987. It is so very important to know the history of, the political history behind the creation of modern Arunachal Pradesh, and also that with which places does it have its border with Assam, Bhutan, China, and Myanmar. So the geopolitical situation of Arunachal Pradesh makes it very vulnerable to various kinds of cultural, linguistic, religious, because we have the Buddhists, the animists, and all kind of people, and also other kinds of influences. And in the midst of that, the way the tribes of Arunachal have held out with their own knowledge systems, with their own belief systems, that has been scripted, that has been written about in the works of Mamangdai. And that is why to know Mamangdai would be to know the other India. To know Mamangdai, to read her work is so very important. In your syllabus, I have seen that there are two poems, The Voice of the Mountains and Small Towns in the River. And I thought that apart from that, you should have a knowledge of what Mamangdai is writing about. Now, a very brief summarization of that entire rugged terrain of Arunachal Pradesh, was done by Xavier Elwin. And what did he call it? He said it is the land of unknown savages, rugged, grand, but uncultured, inhabited by strange, shy creatures who were very averse to receiving strangers. Mamang Dai was born in 1957 at Pasighat, East Siang district, Arunachal Pradesh. She writes in English and does so because her mother tongue, Adi, okay, Adi is her mother tongue, that is a non-script language. And because she was educated at Shillong, Meghalaya, in an English medium boarding school. Thus, her post-colonial association begins with this linguistic duality that is part and parcel of every post-colonial subject formation. As a journalist, writer, and poet, she has extensively written about Arunachal Pradesh and has been vocal about the terminological bracket Northeast literature. In spite of that, it just reminds me actually about Chandra Talpade Mahanti and her statement about third world women. So when she refutes when she states her case rather, and she uses that third world woman terminology in order to hit back or write back, but she uses that terminology. Similarly, Mamangdai also uses this terminology in Northeast literature. Okay. And in a particular interview, I think to Dr. Joydeep Sharongi, Mamangdai stated that I read that interview. It's a wonderful interview, and she stated there that Northeast literature has a homogeneous ring to it, but it's a misnomer. Literature from the Northeast is so diverse as the writers with their different expressions and literature. I have never heard terms like Northwest or Southeast or West Coast literature, etc., to define literature from other parts of the country. Of course, we never hear that this kind of literature is being taught. You have literature from entire South India. I have not come across. Maybe there are. I haven't. Okay, but it's definitely Northeast study centers, Northeast things are there, which not only which definitely bring the thought of Northeast literature to mainstream, but at the same time it also removes it. So this constant bringing closer and distancing, this this bifocality of presence, if I may say, is is a truth, is a reality that continues even date. So unless and until we see that Mamangdai, she is one name that we know of, but there are so many other writers from there who are also writing. Mamangdai was awarded the Ferrier Elwin Prize in 2003 for her book Arunachal Pradesh, The Hidden Land, and she was awarded Padma Shri in 2011. Also received Sahitya Academy Prize in 2017 for her work Black Hill of 2014. It is a wonderful book, and I'm going to focus on that a bit later on. But before that, I would like to tell you that she has written three novels: The Legends of Pensem, Black Hill, The Legends of Pensem in 2006. That's her first work. Then Black Hill in 2014, and Stupid Cupid in 2009. 2009. Okay. So the latest book is Black Hill. Apart from the river poems and the young adult work, she has also written a very nice young adult work. It's illustrated. It's called The Sky Queen, that I would like to show you actually the book. This is The Sky Queen, and it's very nice. It's illustrated for the little children. So that way, even from childhood, a person comes to know that not only do we have fairy tales and folk tales in the major languages, but we also have stories that folklores, myths that are non-major, or that are quote unquote very minor, very happening at the same time. Um, Assertion of the major political concerns, with identity, race, nation, ecology, these are all present in her work. The ever expanding post colonial literature of India has found its way into various curriculums of the colleges and universities, and books have been written till the turn of the century, and these books have managed to enter as regular texts. Okay, for example, Amitav Ghosh's The Shadow Lines, or Kamala Markandaya's Nectar in a Sieve, or Anita Desai's Cry the Peacock, for that matter. Even though the literature from this area is read, It is always read under the group Northeast literature. It never, like a text never gets an entry as a normal name, a normal name. Post-colonialism, as we have known by now, aims to give voice to the unheard, the marginalized, the lost. The essence of post-colonialism, as we know, is heterogeneity. It is also polyglossia. It's not homogeneity. It's never ironing out the differences or the creases of existence. It should be a record of all the resistance ever offered in the face of the overarching domination of all consuming narratives of sameness. I recall Robert J.C. Young's statement: post colonialism commemorates not the colonial but the triumph over it. The post marks the many remarkable victories that should not be allowed. Um, I'm sorry. That should not be allowed to fade into the amnesia of history. Okay. The origins of post-colonialism lie in the historical resistance to colonial occupation and imperial control. Unquote. Mamandai has tried to bring into the fore three things: resistance to colonialism or imperialism by the tribes, as in the Black Hills, the resistance to streamlining national identity, as in Stupid Cupid, and the recourse to tribal history, as in Arunachal Pradesh, the hidden land. Um, at this point, it would be wise to understand the meaning of the word tribe, because if we don't know who or what a tribe is, then it will be very difficult for us to understand the working of Mamandai in her work, The Black Hill, which got her the Sahitya Academy Award. But apart from that, even if it would not have given her any award or a recognition, it is a text that really brings entire Arunachal Pradesh in flesh and blood in front of us. Anthropologist Andre Bete, in his commentary, The Idea of Indigenous People, has extensively researched on the noun tribe. He points out that the 19th century's view of tribe meant not only a particular type of society, but also a stage of evolution. Now, this 19th century is the background that Mamandai has chosen for her Black Hill. She portrays two kinds of interests of the outsiders, or the white men, or the migloons that they call them in the novel. And why have these migloons come in to disturb the tribes? For number one, economic and political imperialism over the land and resources, and secondly, missionary interest to spread Christianity. The white men in this novel, they mean primarily the British by the white men, and also they refer to the French priests. Now, this novel is actually based on the disappearance of a particular French padre or a priest named Father Crick. And Father Crick had been sent by the Paris Foreign Mission, and he had a dream of spreading Christianity or carrying out missionary activities in Tibet. So, in order to go to Tibet, if you again, like after this lecture, end of this evening, just open the geography map. If you open the map of India and see the location of Arunachal Pradesh, you will see that if they wanted to go, the British had their occupation till Assam. After the Burmese War, they had it till Assam. And if these French people could sail up the Brahmaputra, that they call the Barhamputar river, they could go to Tibet via Arunachal Pradesh via the Mishmi Hills. Okay, and that would be very easy for them to do, provided they could stay at peace with the tribe. So I'm very interested in this particular understanding of the word the tribe, because when I speak about the tribe of Arunachal Pradesh, I am talking about the, just a minute, excuse me. Okay. when I talk about the tribes of Arunachal Pradesh, I am in for a surprise because the tribes here are not the normal tribes that we come across, not the tribes that happened, because the period, the time period that she takes up is 1847 to 1854. And this the particular time period we have the English imperialists moving up towards the northeast. I'm sorry I'm using this terminology because in the absence of better terminology, I have to use it. So moves up to the northeast in order to dominate it. Data states that there were multiple stages of evolution coexistent in the various tribes. When he talks about the tribes, the condition of the tribes in the 19th century India, he says that from savage to barbarous, they had all kinds of tribes. He distinguishes between aboriginal and indigenous tribes, and he states that in that particular work, he states that, I quote, in India, the history of interaction between tribal and non tribal populations has been a long and complex one in which both populations have undergone many transformations through usurpation, miscegenation, and migration. By the middle of the 19th century, what are called tribes today had, on the whole, been either subordinated or marginalized economically, politically, and socially. But why were the British moving ahead and disturbing the balance of these tribes? And what were the markers of tribal identity? Apparently, the two markers of tribal identity were language and habitat. Okay. But apart from that, there were also various markers of tribal identity, such as the dress code and the other features. Okay. Now, in Black Hill, Mamang Dai categorically creates the essence of belonging when she creates the various characters. But the characters that come to light, the characters of Kajin Shah, Gimur, Lamet, Marpa, Lendem, Moi, all of them have these meetings or these chance meetings with the outsiders. And the outsiders in this case are either the British or the French priests who have been given the passage to Arunachal Pradesh and who are not able to enter to penetrate the tribal territories. It is very interesting that when the first Anglo 24 opened up the entire northeastern region, and I'm quoting from Mamangdai's Arunachal Pradesh, the hidden land. When this really opened up the entire northeastern region of the country for the first time, agents of the East India Company, along with surveyors and cartographers, began to push forward to explore this territory where no outsider had set foot before. The commercial success of tea cultivation in Assam furthered this interest. It was now felt that the tribes inhabiting the hill tracts were showing themselves to be dangerous neighbors. Okay, and in spite of that, they moved on and on. But at the same time, after having moved a considerable distance, they also had to back out, and then the British policy of non-intervention and the Inner Line Regulations Act of 1873 was passed. So even today, if you go to Arunachal Pradesh, there is a bracketing off, and why this and how this is due to the sanctity that the government wants to to not award, I mean, to let these tribals be. Now, in Black Hill, Mamangdai also talks about the duality of the insider outsider. Now, that is again the name of a book on the Northeast, edited by Preeti Shergill, and it's a very nice book. I have seen it, must read actually. So there is a lot of duality. Okay, the duality that exists there is important because in the context of Northeast, it is difficult and it is not easy to understand the difference between insider and outsider. What makes a man an insider or outsider when you come to the level of tribe identification? Social group theories will tell you that it is in terms of in-group and out-group behavior, and the discussion will turn to the idea of essences. But that is not the case in the case of tribe formation out here. If we think of it in the post-colonial terms, Fano and his kind would think of linking it to the idea of following or conforming to certain conditioning of the subject, and then his or her accruement to a certain behavioral pattern. So either you are entitled to the self or the other, that kind of groupism. But the tribal customs and beliefs, as Mamangda discussed, is hereditary. So if you're born in a particular clan, you remain a part of that particular clan or tribe, and you cannot intermarry, or you cannot leave your tribe, or you cannot leave your territory or your land. And if you migrate, you migrate in clans, or the entire village can migrate, entire family can migrate. Family out here also can mean a large number of people living together. So the outsiders in this case were the people who were different in appearance, in language, in culture, and also in their attitude, or in their affiliations to various life uh, regimes. Okay, the outsiders, the broad group were the British, and they were also called the Ka Kamplung. There were differences amongst the tribal groups also. And we have got 26 tribal groups out there: the Khampis, the Mishmi, the Adi Abor, the Miri, the Singpo, the Pasi, the Dafla, and many of them are there. And each of them had their own territory, their own religions, their myths, their belief systems, and their language. So, it's very interesting the way these all these tribes have coexisted, and coexisted, but not only without war, but definitely there were wars. And in the Black Hill, this is the text that I'm talking about from for a long time, Black Hill. This text, we have a reference to the kind of war, or war as a part of life of this tribal identity. And if you read this book on Arunachal Pradesh, the hidden land, if you read that particular book, then there are pictures of warriors, and warriors are wearing beads that symbolize metal heads. So a warrior belonging to these tribes, they had to fight. Because if you did not wear those heads, you would not get into marital alliance. You could not marry. So, the character Kajin Shah, who is the, let's say, the hero of this particular in this of this particular novel, okay, he says, I quote from the text that Kajin Shah had grown up in an environment of war and death. Steeped in isolation, the tribes living in one valley across from the other viewed their neighbors with suspicion and dread. Claims over land, possession of rivers and streams, and ownership rights to hunt and fish regularly erupted into bloody intertribal feuds, and no one knew when the fighting would end. So, the Black Hill actually speaks of these intertribal wars, or the conflicts. But Dai at the same time gives a detailed description of how repeatedly the Britishers tried to enter this territory, and how the various tribes, the Khampis, the Adis, or the Abors, Abor is again a derogatory kind of a meaning, and Mamangdai herself belongs to the Abor tribe, and how the Abors and the Mishmis, they have thwarted these British inroads that they were trying to make, and how they have tried to preserve their identity, their country, their nation, if I may say, or how they have managed to trust their clan mechanism and maintained their attachment to their land and territory. This might intrigue the metropolitan reader with romantic, overtone, but this is definitely the reality there. Dai's description of the rugged terrain and the even more rugged human beings, the human beings out there who live there, shows an India that refuse to be touched by alternative civilizations. In this novel, however, we see an intertribal love affair between Gimur and Kajinsha. Kajinsha is a Mishmi and Gimur is an Abor. But as I said, that in the novel itself, they are stating that the word Abor, I quote from page 26 of the book, the word Abor was not of these parts. It belonged to the plains. The word conveyed something that meant both barbarous and independent in Assamese and was a term applied to all the tribes occupying the Siang Valley in the mountainous country between Assam and Tibet. Interestingly, in Assam, language, which is something I will talk of later on, but still just a passing reference, that language is such an important issue, even in Arunachal Pradesh, because if you said that so and so is a Mishmi, that person would have said, no, I don't know if you should call me a Mishmi because I don't know what's a Mishmi. You should call me a Kaman or a Tarao or an Idi. So, those kind of subgroups of languages existed among the tribes. And the love story between Gimur and Kajinsha, that is something that goes beyond language. So Mangandai shows how language is not needed there in order to communicate. And Gimur runs away with Kajinsha in spite of not knowing his language or his customs. And their love, the love story forms the backdrop of this story of rebellion. Basically, it's a story of rebellion. And it's also a story of how the British people managed to finally enter by, what happens is Father Crick comes, twice. He manages to enter and he comes there as a healer. Now, in these tribal communities, a very interesting idea of shaman or shaman or what do you call them? The Miri. They call them the Miri, the healers. And we also have them very near to us in Darjeeling. These people are called the Jhakris out here. So these only, the mystical healers and all, they are the ones who are accepted everywhere. So somehow Father Crick wanted to establish himself as a healer and then get the trust of the people and then convert them and then move to Tibet. So that was his mission. And he had to take the help of the local tribal chiefs. And one of them, Lamet, in the story, he is a very cunning man. He's a very treacherous man who arranges for two things, the death of Crick and the elimination of Kajinsha at the same time, because somehow he is able to spread the word that Kajinsha killed Crick. But Kajinsha did not kill Crick. He was a valiant warrior and he is taken to the jail in Dibrugarh where he is hanged to death. And when the news of his death arrived, Gimur had gone to meet him in the prison. But when the news of death arrived, Gimur simply smokes her pipe, and she is, she reminds me so much of The Outsider then. But I'm talking about the famous one that you know. So that I want to say at the end of it is at the end of my talk on Black Hill, because I will go on to the next one now, is that this particular novel is structured from 1847 to 1855, shortly before the rebellion of 1857, and this period shows that how the British repeatedly tried to break into the territories that we were not comfortable letting them in with. Okay. Now, Mamandai has written another very important, very nice novel, Stupid Cupid. And the name, of course, I'm not talking about Legends of Pensam that I have here. Legends of Pensam, which is a very interesting story again, where we have a person falling from the sky. So there's this magic realism kind of a thing, which also exists in Black Hill. Okay. There's a character Nago who becomes who becomes something like an oracle. She starts predicting the future and all that. So, like that, in Legends of Pensam, we have stories that are surreal at times, that are sometimes very very true to the happenings, Okay, so all kind of things we find in the work of Mamang Dai. As far as Father Creek's incident is concerned, that is a part of history. That is true. Father Creek went missing, and where he went missing, where in 1854 he goes missing, and we are not able to find out where Father Creek went missing, but he definitely must have been killed by the tribal people because they understood that he was trying to enter their premises, okay, as a healer, but something more than that, because they were never, one should never think of the tribal people as, you know, um, as a stupid people. So when I come to stupid cupid, what is it about? The name itself suggests that it is a very light-hearted novel. It's a very short novel, and we think that what is it about? And if you go to the internet and find out, it's a love story, and it's about adultery, and it's a very light-hearted novel. Everyone says that, but to me, I think that it is one of the most, you know, very strict commentary on racism. That is something that we read about every time we read that people from the northeast were heckled in the mainland. So Mamang Dai's Stupid Cupid is very different from her other novels because it is set in the heart of New Delhi and because it bespeaks the idea of nations and racism. So, what nation are we talking about if we cannot think of including everybody in it? The nationalism that one finds around us nowadays is so hollow. It is a kind of exclusive force that seeks to flare differences and not respect differences, not assimilate them, not allow them to exist, but to iron them out. Tagore had spoken of inclusive nationalism, the kind that speaks of coexistence. However, the people living on the borders of this country have to undergo racial slur in the heart of the capital. Mamangai also has another very interesting point in this particular uh, novel where she talks about the migration of the students from the northeast to Delhi, to JNU in particular, and to other places also, and this constant shift from the hills to the capital for jobs and other for business purpose. Okay, so in Stupid Cupid, the central character Adna, okay, she is the owner of Four Seasons, which is a kind of homestay where the adulterous couples can meet, and she is running this business in the heart of Delhi, and she is at heart, she realizes that she misses a lot of her hometown. So she says that, I'm quoting from her novel, "Oh, the Northeast is a different country altogether." Just when everyone was saying, "Oh, the Northeast is a different country altogether," there was an exodus from our parts to Delhi, as if the revelation of differences had cast a spell on us all, and we were turned into a motley caravan of pilgrims eager to reach the capital. There are so many of us in the city now, from Mizoram, Meghalaya, Nagaland, from Arunachal, Assam, Manipur, and Sikkim, and we mingled with others from every small town and settlement of the country. Small towns are very important for her, because the poem that you have, "Small Towns and the River," which I'll come to later on, is definitely another thing. So we could have opted for a different life, been someplace else, but there it was. We landed up in universities and training institutes, shared flats and hostels, and focused on study, career, chance, opportunity, and all the rest that the city offers to everyone. From Delhi, the Northeast was like a map of mountains and rivers on another planet. So, the thing that we were talking about, the life on the periphery, the marginalized existence, that conditions itself into the human being. And when that person moves out of Northeast and comes to Delhi and holds a business in Delhi and stays there, in spite of that, that person cannot understand that why that person feels, out of place out there. Later in the novel, we see how Jia, who was a so-called fresh arrival from Arunachal Pradesh, She had to deal with, undergo the trauma of being labeled an outsider. And it so happened that Gia and TD, okay, they are friends. They happened to, they were actually traveling together, and they wanted to hire a taxi. But the taxi was taken by another local lady. So I'm relating an incident from the text. And young man had jumped in, and then another lady had jumped in. And Gia rushed forward and said that I was first in line. And Gia is a cousin of Edna, and she is from Arunachal Pradesh, and she is new to Delhi. Okay, so the man between her and the woman, they said, okay, there's another taxi behind, you can get there. Hmm. When well, they can take one. I'm not budging, said Gia. Because Gia pushed into the taxi, the lady said that you should get down because she was not like the lady. Her features were different. Okay, so of course you are aware of the kind of racial statements like kinky and all that applied to people who had mongoloid features, who have mongoloid features, and how they are constantly abused and constantly, you know, they have to undergo all kinds of humiliating taunts, those kind of things. Gia suddenly said that, well, they can take that one. I am not budging. Suddenly, the woman shouted angrily, hey, you, Jao, Jao, go back to your own dish. I repeat, hey, you, Jao, Jao, go back to your own dish. Gia saw red. She jumped out and she shouted in Hindi and English and she said, how dare you say such a thing? Do you think I'm Chinese? Huh? I'm an Indian. Do you know where I come from? Do you know where that is, you idiot woman? And I bet you are also not even from Delhi. You must be from some lousy backwaters. Jao Jao, huh? And even if I was Chinese, you have no right to say such a thing to anyone. It's people like you who create hatred. You know that? You scum. And then she spat into the cab. So that kind of violent reaction, comes out of a very simple, beautiful, and harmless person like Gia because she was being branded as not belonging to the place called Delhi and not belonging because she looked different. So um, this this novel of Mamangdai is so contemporary. It is for the people from the metropolis to read. It is for the people to read and understand how this subtle stream of racism runs. But why do the people migrate? There are various problems in every small town, okay? And now I come to the idea of small towns that is so important for Mamangdai. Mamangdai says that in Stupid Cupid, she's writing that in the last decade, nearly every small town in a region had turned into a junkie town, and almost every family had been affected in some way. Junkie town here means that most of the families had children who were addicted to drugs. So drug abuse is another evil that goes on in this particular Northeast that she is bringing to the fore. I'm sure this is a problem of the entire Indian population. I mean, it's not that something that happens only in the Northeast, but it also happens there. And if and when we read Mamandai, we come to know that they are not so different as we think them to be, as we are taught to think that they are different, that they do not belong to the mainstream. And what is this mainstream? Who creates this mainstream? And why should we abide by this mainstream? That is why it is important the way she lays emphasis on small towns. And in this particular poem, The Small Towns and the River, I'm sure that you must be thinking that when shall I come to the poems? But let me tell you something off the record that, to know the real Mamangdai, to really read what she is about, I think two books should be read by you. The first one is definitely Black Hill, and the other one is Stupid Cupid. And the poems, of course, the poem, she's a renowned poet. She writes very well. The poem Small Towns and the River has a very abrupt opening. small towns always remind me of death. So why? She says in an interview that she was actually mourning the death of a very young aunt. Okay, and the death becomes a metaphor out here. And there is a line: life and death, life and death. Only the rituals are permanent. The rituals are very important in the lives of these people of the Northeast. They have the strategies, and one of the strategies that Dai explores, and this is a write up on small towns and the river by Antonia Navarro Tregero. And it's a wonderful write up where she says that one of the strategies that Dai explores, as many other ethnic minority poets, is the use of traditional local language or folklore. There are numerous images of intangible culture such as songs, rituals, myths, native language, and local landscape in this selection. The spectral world of spirits, gods, and goddesses is also incorporated in her poetry. There are also allusions to exemplary males, highlighting the importance of women and children as well. So, small towns and the river, that is what I think summarizes her world because to her, she says in various interviews again, she says that she's so attached to the rains and the river and to the water and the other elements, and how small towns have these rivers, and these rivers have soul. So the rivers are not just geographical entities; they are alive, and the rivers, they stretch past the town from the first drop of rain to dry earth and mist on the mountaintop. The river knows the immortality of water. So what is very important out here is Dai's connection, the deep ecological connection that she has with the world she has grown up in. And at the same time, towards the end of that poem, she says, small towns grow with anxiety for the future. The disintegration of simple life she's pointing at, progress actually erases marks of identity and belonging. In Arunachal Pradesh, the hidden land, she says how progress actually bulldozes. In the beginning of Pensum, the legends of Pensum, there we see that when she's going by the helicopter, she sees the progress. That kind of progress is not always progressive. The progress can be regressive. The progress can be a retardation. The progress can be a delimitation. The progress need not be, forced upon these people. Rather, their ethnicities, that can be done. So, what are the, what were the people of independent, the authorities of independent India doing? They were trying to erase their identity in the name of progress. And then we have the poem, The Voice of the Mountain, where I find Namang Dai's interest with the language. Now, in every work of hers, I find language very interesting. She takes words from her own language and she tries to translate them. And as I said, Migloon, Ka, Klampung, and there are various, more like the name of the god, Done Polo, which means the sun and the moon. And we have terms like Abotani, she speaks of that. And when she's talking about the history of Arunachal Pradesh, she gives such a huge importance to the mountains. And I just cannot resist myself from reading the introduction to Arunachal Pradesh, the hidden land. There we have in the very beginning, she says that the story of the beginning of the world, and she says that formerly Sedi and Melo, the sky, Sedi is the earth and Melo is the sky, they lay close together and they loved each other very much. But one day what happened that, uh, you know, Polang Sabo was born. Polang Sabo is another, you know, with the horns, a character, and his horns hit the clouds, and in his anger he tossed them away far above the earth. After being thus separated from her husband, the sky, the husband is the sky, and Sedi is the earth. So Sedi wants to return to her husband, and in her desire to return to him, to be one with him, she was raising herself towards the sun. But suddenly the moon appeared, and she was ashamed, and she went back. That part of her body, which was reaching towards her lord, became fixed forever as the great mountain. And she begins her, the serious part of her work with saying, talking about the mountain dwellers. And mountains are very symbolic in her work. Mountains speak of the desire to reach high, and the Black Hill, as I have already spoken so much of. And we also have the territories. She speaks of that. We live in territories forever ancient and new, as we speak in changing languages. So, speech or language is equally important, and this language need not be scripted. It can be a language of the heart that exists between Gimor and Kajinsha. It can be the written language that the priests were trying to learn in Black Hill, trying to learn Tibetan and trying to learn Assamese, and how they could only speak a Patwa version of the languages, but couldn't really get to the heart of the language, and how this very politics of language is the central question today as to the relegation of Mamangdai to the periphery of post-colonial reading in India, because the time has come when Mamangdai should be included not as bracketed under Northeast literature, but in the mainstream. There are various other ways to approach her. There's the historical approach. You can talk about the feminist question, the woman question. She writes about wonderful women. She talks about what should I say, a very interesting religion of that particular place, the original indigenous religion, and the religion that came to her with the outsiders. But at the end of the day, what Mamangdai is all about is Mamangdai is the other face that needs to become the self of post-colonial reading in India, and that should be included as soon as possible, I feel, in the mainstream Indian curriculum, so that people are able to get a glimpse of the strong writing that is being practiced in our part of our very own country. So I think with that I should wrap up my talk right now. It is a very, as I said, I'm just holding the torch, and it is for you to go ahead and continue and read more into whatever text I have touched upon. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, madam, for such a wonderful and thought-provoking deliberation. It's always a pleasure listening to your talk, especially when we listen anything about Northeast from you. Uh, Today, your speech on Mamangdai and the Indian post-colonial actually breaks the subtle veil towards understanding the long ignored, long silenced, marginalized sections of India who are least talked in the mainstream culture and academia. These people are the people of Northeast. Northeast has a long story of struggle, resistance. Under the broad umbrella of post-colonial, the native writers of Northeast like Eastern Kayar, Mamang Dai attempted to rediscover, reinterpret, and revisit their literature and culture. So it is through your illuminating speech that we come to know that how Mamang Dai, in her work, specifically you spoke about his novels such as The Black Hills, The Hidden Land, The Stupid Cupid. So what is that? That what can I say? That the tribal identity, the tribal sensibilities, and ethnic belongings through the exploration of native myth, collective memory, oral traditions, legends, beliefs, rituals, traditions, practices that go into the formation of a way of life, and the singular identity of tribe, these tribal people that actually you referred or you spoke. So this is how, so far as your talk is concerned, you have established her as a marginalized subaltern post-colonial woman writer, who yet to find a space in mainstream post-colonial study, which Anindo sir also mentioned in his talk. So you have very genuinely problematized the very fact of post-colonialism in Northeast literature, especially in Mamang Dai's works. And I am quite sure that my students and many other emerging scholars who are present here must be immensely benefited at your talk. Thank you, madam. Thank
Thank you.
you once again. Looking forward to listening more from you in
Thank
future. Well, after listening the talks from our two esteemed speakers, who mainly focused their speech on post-colonial study in South Asian and Indian subcontinent. Now let us travel to the plain of Africa, which we will hear from our next respected speaker, Dr. Arnab Kumar Sinha. Before Arnab sir begins his lecture, I would request Tanmaita Pal. Tanmaita is our fourth semester student to welcome and introduce our esteemed speaker. Thank you all. Tanmita, over to you. Tanmita, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. Good evening, madam. Uh, Now, I would like to introduce our third speaker for today's webinar, Mr. Arnab Kumar Sinha, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Culture Studies, University of Bardhaman. He is a renowned scholar and an academic as well. He has till date published 14 articles and essays. His research interest in post-colonial literature has found an expression in his articles published in various books and journals, and he has written on a range of topics. His article published in the edited book, The Diasporic Dilemma, Exile, Alienation and Belonging in the year 2014, deals with Mohsin Hamid's The Reluctant Fundamentalist, whereas for the volume 3 of the journal Negotiations, he writes on Chinua Achebe, the Nigerian novelist, an article titled Theoretical Dimensions of Crossing the River, Chinua Achebe's Chiki and the River. For the edited book, The Indian Diaspora, Contestations and Representations, he chooses the M.G. Vasanji, born in Kenya, to Indian immigrants. Whereas, for the 11th volume of Asiatic, he writes a book review, Sridip Mukherjee's Living the Post-colonial Indian Literature in Perspective. As co-editor, he has to his credit a number of books like Indian Fiction in English, Mapping the Contemporary Literary Landscape, Contemporary Indian English Poetry and Drama, Changing Canons and Responses. As a supervisor, he has guided a number of scholars, and today it's a pleasure on our part to have Arnab sir amongst us to guide us through the topsy-turvy lens of post-colonial literature. Today, sir will speak on transformation of the Igbo society, religion and cultural crisis in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And so now, without wasting any more time, I would like to request sir to share with us his valuable perspective on post-colonial literature. Over to you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. So good evening to all of you. I hope I am audible. Is the voice clear?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So at the outset, I would like to thank the administrative officials of Ananda Chandra College, and also especially I would like to thank the Department of English, Ananda Chandra College, for inviting me, because it's really a privilege for me to present my paper amongst esteemed speakers. And I must say that as Dr. Shanjukta Chatterjee mentioned at the beginning of her paper, that Ananda has really set the tone for this webinar at the very beginning. He has introduced us to a very important area which we need to really think and chalk out the strategies in which the strategies that we must use in order to include in our syllabus certain very texts, certain texts which, as Ananda pointed out, are there in the periphery. And it was really a delight for me to listen to Dr. Shanjukta Chatterjee, because I do have a bit of interest, not much, but I do have a bit of interest in Northeast poetry, and it was really an interesting talk. Now, today, as the topic of my discussion is focused on Chinua Achebe, and I shall specifically focus on Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And as the title has already been mentioned, I shall primarily focus on the Igbo society, because you see that Things Fall Apart is a classic text. It can be approached from numerous perspectives. But for my discussion today, and also because my time is limited, I shall focus on the religion, religion, which is an important aspect in the text. And I believe that the Igbo metaphysics, if we understand the very idea of living an Igbo life, then we can also understand that why these people who are being represented by Achebe, particularly, as you know, that Okonkwo is the central character in the novel, and along with Okonkwo there are a host of other characters who happen to be Igbo people. So why they actually could not, in a sense, resist the colonizers? Why they failed, in fact, to perform when the colonizers attempted to, in a sense, colonize them? So I believe, among the various factors which led to the downfall, or which led to the so-called the colonization of the Igbo clan, as it has been represented in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, one very important aspect which we need to consider seriously is the Igbo religion. Igbo religion, as we all know, and as it is very clear, is not like Christian religion. And, we need to, therefore, understand that this representation of Igbo religion in the text is important, because Okonkwo, as a character, is a part of that particular belief system. And this belief system, to a large scale, is responsible for consolidating this community, this Igbo community that we find in Things Fall Apart. And at the same time, we see that this religion, in fact, fails to provide any guideline at the time of crisis. The text, as you all know, is divided into three sections: part 1, part 2, part 3, part 1, part 2, and part 3. Now, in the part 1 of the text, as we see that people, or these Igbo people, particularly Okonkwo, is a man who is respected for his bravery, and is a man who is well known in his clan because he is a firm believer of this particular system of thought, system of religious thought. So he performs all the important religious rituals. He's an he's a devout Igbo in that sense. He is dedicated to Igbo religion. And what is quite important is the fact that at the very beginning of the text, and particularly in the part 1 of the text, you see that Okonko, along with the entire clan of Umofia is the name of the clan that you find in Things Fall Apart. This entire clan is very, very significant. This entire clan is very significantly following a kind of a religion that is very important from the perspective of their lifestyle. And if we focus on this belief system, this religious belief system, then we find that the Igbos, the individual Igbos, they are, guided by an idea of dualism. Now, this dualism is very important in the construction of Igbo identity. And it is because of this dualism that is present in each and every Igbo character that the characters very importantly feel that they are secure, they are independent, and they are also a part of a larger community. So it is this dualism that provides them a stable basis, and this dualism is obviously a part of the Igbo metaphysics, the Igbo way of life. Now, let me explain this dualism. Now, there is one particular article which has been written by Jude Okpala, and Jude Okpala's article is titled Igbo Metaphysics in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Now, in this article, Okpala does talk about this dualism. Now, dualism, as Okpala says, I'm quoting, dualism is a principle of Igbo metaphysics which underscores the interaction of the physical and non-physical beings in human personality, unquote. Now, this aspect can be very well found in the novel if we understand, or if we see that how the characters in these novels, particularly the Igbo characters in this novel, they always try to assess their position, their individual position, in relation to the spirits. Now, each and every individual, as we see, is guided by his or her chi, C-H-I-G. Now, this word chi, you find, has been used by Achebe throughout the novel. Now, chi means individual spirit. In the case of Okonko, you see that Okonko is guided by his chi. In the case of Obidika, another friend of Okonko, he is guided by his own chi. So this chi, or the individual spirit, is the guiding spirit, is the spirit that is there, or that coexists with the individual person. And it is this chi that actually, in fact, remains or is there always beside the individual. Now, regarding this presence of a spirit beside a human personality, in fact, Achebe says in one of his critical works, he says, the world in which we, I'm quoting again, unquote, the world in which we means obviously here Igbo people, the world in which we live has its double and counterpart in the realm of the spirits. And Achebe says that these spirits mean chi. A man lives here and his chi there. Indeed, the human being is only one half of a person. So the Igbo concept of a man is a man who is an individual who is half a man and half a spirit, is a man who is guided by the individual chi. Now, interesting thing is this, that these individual spirits which guide the individuals, Igbo individuals, these individual spirits, they obviously lead a kind of a life where they believe that there is ultimately the great chi. Great chi means the great God. And this great God is, a mention of this great God is there in the text. And we see that this great God is obviously Chukku. You find this reference to Chukku in the novel, Things Fall Apart. So Chukku is the great God, the great chi. And this Chukku, in fact, is very important because it is the guiding spirit behind the entire Igbo community. So Igbo individuals are guided by individual spirits, that is chi, and the entire Igbo community is guided by the great chi, which is known as Chukku, and Chukku is the guiding spirit behind the Igbo community. Now, we see that in the first section or the first part of the text, there is a kind of a representation of the Igbo culture, which clearly makes us feel that the entire community, that is the Imofia community, is united, is working very well, and is a kind of a community that is functional, doing all the performing all the ceremonies around the year, and there is happiness all around. So in the first part of this particular text, we see that there is as such no crisis. But when crisis sets in, obviously we find that these characters, these Igbo characters, they sort of they sort of start disorienting. The chi, in fact, the individual chi fails to guide the individuals. And what becomes quite significant is the rise of the individual ego. In fact, if you clearly read this particular novel, you can understand that Okonko's failure as a character in the novel, Okonko's failure as a character in the novel, occurs because he, in fact, is guided by his individual ego. Initially he is a man who obviously is guided by his chi, but as the novel or the narrative progresses, we find it's not only Ogonko, but the other characters, the other Igbo characters, who slowly become egoistic, who slowly start giving more emphasis on their own ego. And then, this chi or the individual spirit, that starts diminishing, or influence of that particular individual chi starts diminishing. And then the entire community, therefore, falls in a state of crisis. So the colonization of this entire Igbo community occurs as such because of this, failure of the individuals to in a sense connect with their chis. Because these individuals, in a sense, they start giving a lot of prominence to their individual ego. And Okonko is a very, very bright example of that. In fact, we see that almost towards the end of the first part of the novel, we see that Okonko kills Ikemefuna. Ikemefuna is a boy who comes to Umofia from another clan, and he is killed because the oracle of the hill and the caves. Now, this again, the oracle of the hill and caves happen to be the dominant god or the dominant spirit that always gives orders to the Umofia clan. So Ukemefuna was adopted by Okonko because this boy Ikemefuna came to Umofia because the other clan did not want to fight with Umofia. Umofia was very powerful, and therefore in order to avoid a battle, Ikemefuna was gifted by the other clan. So Ikemefuna was adopted by Okonkwo. But at one point of time, after almost 3 years or 4 years, when Ikemefuna had almost settled in Umofia and had almost started almost started becoming intimate with Okonkwo's children. At one day, one of the elders, one of the elderly persons of the clan comes to Okonkwo and tells that, well, the oracle of the hills and the gods has ordered that we must now kill Ikemefuna. Now here, obviously, the order of the clan, the order of the highest god must be obeyed, and we find that Okonkwo is ready to sacrifice Ikemefuna. So Ikemefuna is taken away from the Umofia clan, and when he is out, when he's taken away from the Umofia clan in a forest, when he is about to be killed, and then we find that Ikemefuna runs away from those persons who wants to kill him, and he, moves close to Okonkwo, because he feels that Okonkwo would save him from the killers. But Okonkwo, in order to prove his masculinity, what he does, he kills Ikemefuna. Now, this act of killing Ikemefuna is important because that elderly person who actually had come to Okonkwo and had told him that Ikemefuna must be killed, he had also told Okonkwo that Okonkwo must not have any kind of hand in this killing, because he, after all, is the father of Ikemefuna. Ikemefuna treats Okonkwo as his father. But at that particular moment, when Ikemefuna runs towards Okonkwo so that he may be saved from the killers, Okonkwo, what he does, in order to prove that he has a very strong masculine ego, he kills Ikemefuna. Now, this act of killing ultimately is considered by Okonkwo as a sin, because that old person who had actually told him that he must not have any kind of hand in his killing, his words start ringing in his mind. He couldn't sleep for a few days, and later during a burial procession, there is a burial procession. One of the old persons died in his clan. What happens? Quite miraculously, Okonkwo, Okonkwo kills a person. He kills a boy. In fact, there is a gun that Okonkwo carries, and he inadvertently kills a small boy. A bullet actually is fired from Okonkwo's gun, and he does this inadvertently. It is not intentionally he does. And as he kills this small boy, then we see that after this, Okonkwo is considered as a sinner. So first, Okonkwo is considered as a sinner, or Okonkwo considers himself as a sinner after he kills Ikemefuna, because he feels that he should not have killed Ikemefuna. And later, obviously, in the beginning of the second section of the text, we see that he inadvertently kills a small boy. Now, it is these two killings obviously lead to a kind of a crisis in his life, and the Igbo community, Umofia, the Umofia people, or the people in the Umofia clan, they decide to punish Okonkwo, because Okonkwo ultimately has killed a small boy, and though he has inadvertently killed this boy, but after all, this is a sin, and therefore he is punished by the people, by the clan members. And what is the punishment? He is sent. He is asked to remain outside his clan for a period of 7 years. He's sent to a kind of an exile. He has to lead. The punishment is Okonkwo has to lead a life of an exile. He has to remain away from his clan for 7 years. So this is the beginning of Okonkwo's separation from the entire clan. And also, you find that in the act of killing Ikemefuna, Okonkwo has already displayed his ego, because before killing Ikomafuna, his individual spirit never had guided Okonkwo, or never had instructed Okonkwo to kill Ikomafuna. It was an act that was committed, or it was an act that was done because he as an individual felt was right. He wanted to prove to the other clan members that he is not fearful to do any kind of an act which has been ordered by the oracle of the hills and the caves. Now, obviously, this act of killing Ikemefuna can be considered as important because here Ikemefuna is a kind of a character who is killed, and Okonkwo also is a kind of a character who feels that by killing Ikemefuna he has committed a grave sin, and he is, as we find, he is punished later because he does another criminal offense by killing a small boy, and he is punished later by when he has to remain in exile. Now, when Okonkwo is in a state of exile, when he is away from his clan for a period of 7 years, we see that slowly the white men, they start they start coming to the small villages that are located around the village where these Emofians live. They don't come directly to the Emofian community, but they come to the surrounding villages, surrounding communities, and the news of these white men coming and obviously convincing the people to adopt Christianity. These news of news reaches to Okonkwo. Okonkwo actually comes to know about these white men coming and convincing the local people, the so-called the Igbo people, so that they adopt Christianity. And Oberika, who happens to be a very close friend of Okonkwo, he meets Okonkwo when Okonkwo is in exile and informs Okonkwo that the Igbo communities living in other villages, or the other Igbo communities, not the Emofians, but the other Igbo communities, are really in a state of crisis because they are unable to tackle these colonizers who are slowly coming in groups and establishing their government, establishing their colonial system. And obviously, in some parts, as they have already come to know, they are also building churches. So, in the second section of this particular text, we see that how these set of Igbo people, they are responding to how they are responding to the colonial intrusion. So the colonizers are coming and how they are responding. In one case, as we find that there is a lot of violence. One set of one particular community, not the Emofians, but another community, obviously living in a different place. They adopt violent means. They kill a white man, and they feel that by killing this white man, they will be able to stop the incursion of the colonizers. But ultimately, we see that a lot more white men come and they shoot these people, and they abolish the entire community. So this news also comes. This news also reaches Okonkwo, where Okonkwo sees, or where Okonkwo actually realizes that if there is a direct kind of violent activity, then the colonizers may react in such a way that the whole community may be eradicated. So in exile, Okonkwo therefore starts thinking about strategies. What kind of strategies should be adopted in order to tackle these colonizers? Because he knows that after 7 years he has to come back to Mofia, and he has to he has to innovate certain strategies so that he can stop the colonizers from corrupting the minds of the Igbo people. Now, in this crucial juncture, obviously, in the second part of the text, we see that slowly the influence of the oracle and the hills, the influence of the so-called the Chukku, the great god Chukku, these influences fade. Why? Because the people, they start, the Igbo people, they start, reacting in various ways. Now, within these 7 years, when Okonko is absent from his own clan, uh, there are people who slowly start believing in Christianity, who start feeling that, well, Christianity is a good religion and it is a good alternative, because Christianity is unlike the Igbo religion, and Christianity believes in one God and not many gods. Because these Christian missionaries, they in fact convince the Igbo people that the gods that they pray, these gods are just stones and trees. But in Christianity, there is a human God. So this idea also influences many people. So slowly, the Igbo community starts transforming. And the reason for this transformation is mainly because the people, the Igbo people, they start acting, or they start behaving in a way which makes us feel that they are guided by their individual egos, not their individual chi. So we see that how in the second part of the text, in the section of the text, these people slowly are getting, in a sense, separated from the Igbo religious codes and values. They start, they start behaving in a way which makes us feel that these people are all in some way or other applying their or using their own egos in order to take major decisions in their life. And Okonko, as we see, when he comes back, almost at the end of the second section, when he comes back to his clan, he finds that the entire clan has almost transformed. And one thing that strikes in his mind is the fact that how the clan has become so very effeminate, how the clan is behaving in a way that women would behave. He finds that the entire he finds that the entire clan is lacking in terms of masculinity, right? So when he comes back, he therefore obviously thinks of devising a proper strategy so that the entire community comes together, so that the entire community can again be in a sense integrated, and thereby the entire community can give a kind of a what you can say, a befitting reply to the colonizers, because Okonko is as a character very much against the colonizers, and he therefore starts convincing people in his community. Now, if you focus on certain pages, I would like to focus on page number 103. I am following the African Writers Series edition. Now, in page number 103, you see that the strategy that the Western people use in order to make the Igbos feel that they must leave their religion and join Christianity. So what the white men actually say, I'm quoting from a very important conversation that takes place between the white men and the Igbos. So there is a kind of a meeting that is taking place. Okonko is not present here, and in this meeting, the white men, they are saying, just mark what they say. I'm quoting 103 page number. All the gods you have named are gods at all. They are gods of deceit. Who will tell you to kill your fellows and destroy innocent children? So here, the white man who is actually speaking, he's saying that, your God actually orders the clan to kill an innocent children. Obviously, the white man here is referring to the incident of Ikemefuna's killing. So no god actually orders a clan to kill an innocent boy. Obviously, he's referring to Ikemefuna. They are gods of deceit who will tell you to kill your fellows and destroy innocent children. There is only one true God, and He has made the earth, the sky, you and me and all of us. Obvious, unquote. So here the white man is actually saying that there is only one Christian God, and that Christian God is the true God, and any other God apart from the Christian God is a false God. Now, after this, obviously, as we see that in page number 108, if you come to page number 108, there is again another interesting. Yes, there is another interesting idea that comes to Okonkwo's mind, and Okonkwo here is really worried because Okonkwo, after he comes back to his clan after a gap of almost 7 years, he sees that his own son Noi has joined the missionaries. He is now receiving English education, and Noi was one of Okonkwo's beloved children. So this is really a matter of grave concern. And then at this point of time, Okonkwo in fact realizes that probably there is some problem with his chi. Chi means his individual spirit. Why is his individual spirit making him suffer like this? Why is he suffering like this, and why is the clan also suffering? Why is the clan not devising any proper strategy to tackle the colonizers? Why, he cried in his heart, should he, I'm quoting, should he, Okonkwo, of all people, be cursed with such a son? He saw clearly in it the finger of his personal god or chi. For how else could he explain his great misfortune and exile, and now his despicable son's behavior? So in this way, you see that Okonkwo, in a sense, questions his individual spirit and realizes that something must be done in order to tackle the colonizers. Some kind of a strategy must be invented. Now, here in page number 113, you see that people are actually discussing a probable strategy that can be used to stop the colonizers from converting the Igbos to into Christianity. Now here, as one of the members say, it is not our custom to fight for our gods. Let us not presume to do so now. If a man kills the sacred python in the secrecy of his heart, the matter lies between him and the god. So there, I'm intervening here. So already there is a news that one particular person who is now receiving English education, he has killed the sacred python. So killing the sacred python is really a grave sin. And this person who has killed the sacred python, must be severely punished. But people here obviously are arguing that let us not punish this person because his chi, that means that person's chi, that person's individual spirit, will after all punish that person. Let us not, think of punishing him otherwise, because the chi is responsible for punishing, for correcting the human personality, for punishing the human, for punishing any human who commits any kind of sin. Now, obviously, in this context, Okonkwo, instead of speaking about this particular incident where a person has killed the sacred python, he finds, or he realizes that people are not seriously considering the influence of Christianity. Why are they not thinking about tackling the colonizers? Why he and the other clan members are not thinking seriously about evolving their evolving their religious codes and customs in such a way so that they can they can they can they can stop these Igbo people from leaving their clan and joining the missionaries. Okay, so just mark what Openko says. If a man comes into my heart and defecates on the floor, what do I do? Do I shut my eyes? No, I take a stick and break his head. That is what a man does. These people are really pouring filth over us. These people means obviously the colonizers. And Okeke says we should pretend not to see. Okonko made a sound full of disgust. This was Omanli clan, he thought. Such a thing would never happen in his fatherland, Umofia. So this is something which is unimaginable in Umofia. Why are Umofians behaving in this way? Now, something must be done. And there is another man, he also says, we should do something, but let us ostracize these men meaning obviously these men who, after receiving English education, after adopting Christianity, are polluting our religion. We would then not be held accountable for their abominations. So in this way, you see that throughout, section 2 and the last section, Okonko thinks of devising various strategies so that he can tackle against the colonizers. But the problem with Okonko is this, that he fails to devise this strategy. He fails to, in fact, organize the entire community and thereby think of a kind of a probable strategy to stop the colonizers from conquering them. Because you see that in the case of the Umofians, as HEB here shows, that the English colonizers, they use logic and rationalism. Okay, when they talk with the Igbos, they use logic and convince the Igbos that they must leave their gods and join Christianity, because their gods, not one god but gods, because in Igbo system of thought, in Igbo system, religious system, there are many gods. Their gods have failed to provide them any kind of proper guidance. In the case of the Igbos, what actually is a big lack is that they do not make any kind of, what you can say, assessment of the European culture. The Europeans, or rather in this case the English missionaries, when they come to Umofia, they come with an aim to conquer the other culture, and they come with a lot of preparedness. They meet with these people, they interact, they become friends with these people, and try to slowly, psychologically conquer their minds. What was needed, and what actually Okonko tries to do, is to build a kind of a counter strategy. But this counter strategy is not possible, or he fails to build this counter strategy because he fails to, in a sense, build a kind of a general consensus. The Igbo community, in fact, is disintegrated. This disintegrates because, as HEB shows, the religious belief system of the Igbos, that actually fails to guide them. That actually fails to provide them a proper direction. Now, had the oracle of the hills and the caves guided them, or had the oracles and the caves, or the Chukku, the great god, and had that god guided them properly, then this disintegration would not have occurred. And this lack of guidance occurred, or religion in fact failed, in the case of the Igbos, because the Igbos were were very much willing to assert their individual egos. So in the case of the Igbos, their tragedy occur because of this individual egos. And the failure, as you find, is not because they failed to resist the colonizers, but because they failed to, in fact, uh, keep themselves anchored to a particular belief system. And this detachment from the belief system occurred because of the because of their willingness to use their ego. In fact, those who joined the Christian missionaries, those who received education from the Christian missionaries, they also were very much egoistic, very much like Okonko. So it is because of this ego, individual ego, that these characters, in fact, or the entire Imofian community disintegrates. And therefore, the chi, the individual spirit, the chi, and obviously the great god, the Chukku, fails to keep the entire clan, in a sense, anchored, or in a sense, what you can say, united. And that's why what Achibi in fact here tries to show is is the fact that these Igbo people in fact failed to failed to evolve failed to evolve their religious codes and customs in a state of crisis. When the crisis when there is crisis, or when actually they encounter crisis, they fail to in a sense evolve or their religious system, in fact, did not in a sense respond, because these individuals started acting in different ways, started behaving in different ways. And that's why there is one particular critic who, in fact, does talk about this particular issue, the issue of Igbos failing and the missionaries actually becoming victorious over the Igbos. The name of this critic obviously is Mackenzie, Charles Mackenzie. Now, Mackenzie, in his article, he says that the Igbo religious codes and practices, these do not evolve. These Igbo religious codes and practices fail to evolve and fail to, in fact, adopt to the changing times, and also, does not strategically confront the colonizers. Had they strategically confronted the colonizers, had they been united, then Okonko would not have committed suicide. So Okonko's suicide, in fact, at the end of the text, is a kind of a act which makes us feel that he as a character has not only failed, but the clan has failed, because the clan in fact disintegrates. And the chief reason behind this disintegration, as we see, is not merely because of the advent of the colonial missionaries, but because of the fact that these Igbo individuals, they fail to keep themselves anchored to their religious belief system. So religion and cultural crisis therefore are intimately linked in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And most importantly, if we focus on page number 118, we see that how Okonko is fearing that just before his suicide, how he's fearing that this clan slowly is failing to deliver. Just mark what Okonko realizes. But I fear, page number 118, for you young people, because you do not understand how strong is the bond of kinship. You do not know what it is to speak with one voice, and what is the result. An abominable religion has settled among you. A man can now leave his father and his brothers. He can curse the gods of his fathers and his ancestors, like a hunter's dog that suddenly goes mad and turns to his master. So this community actually disintegrates because, as you see, that there occurs a kind of what we can say a distancing of the individuals from their cheese, from their individual spirits. So religion, or what you can say, Igbo religion, in fact, fails because of the failure of these individuals to keep themselves connected at a time of crisis, keep themselves connected to their own indigenous religion at a time of crisis. They start, as I said, as I have been arguing throughout this lecture, they start behaving in a way which makes us feel that they are guided by their individual egos. So, therefore, the clan fails, and therefore, as you see that that Okonko also, commits suicide, and Okonko's death, in fact, marks the disintegration of the entire clan. In fact, we can also see that how Okonko's death can in fact also be considered as a kind of a death which in a sense distances him from the so-called ontological existence of the community. When he dies, just mark that how the community also in a sense disowns him. At the beginning of the text, when the narrative begins, he is very much integral to the entire community. At the end of the text, the community is not even ready to offer him a proper burial. He is disowned by the community. So it is the culmination point, because a character, he has to commit suicide because of this dissociation between the individual self and the chief. He just marked that at the end of the text, when an official comes, then there is Okonko's friend Obidika. He comes and informs the official that this is Okonko's body hanging from a tree, and as Umofians, they cannot offer a proper burial to him because he, after all, has committed a grave sin. He has committed suicide. And this is something which is a very serious offense, and therefore he is being disowned. He will not be offered a proper burial. So, this is how the entire clan, as you find, fails, and how the entire clan, in fact, disintegrates. So we need to understand the philosophy behind things fall apart. Things fall apart because religion, for that matter, fails. Because people, in a sense, get distant from the Igbo religious system, and that is how the entire clan, as you find, is in a sense fails. It fails to stop the colonizers from conquering their minds. Okay, so with this, I would like to end my discussion, and thanks to the organizers again for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sinha, for that extremely layered untangling of the meta-narrative of belief and faith in the novel of Things Fall Apart. I was really impressed and also moved by almost like a performance of a griot that you narrated and took the students through the entire story of Things Fall Apart, taking them in detail through every individual plot turn where religion becomes a major crisis point or a flash point on which the novel literally changes itself or changes the tone in which it is communicating the vision of the story to us. I think Compared to the other two papers that we have heard today, we all have observed how Professor Sinha's paper was a very detailed reading of a particular novel, and this in itself is a lesson for a lot of our students in the department in the very act of close reading of a novel along one particular social science category or a social science concept like religion itself. Now, over to the people conducting the Q&A session. I would pass on the responsibilities of the speaker chair to Joytro now.
Thank you, Shanjukta. After 3 rounds of thought-provoking lectures from our esteemed speakers, I'm sure that the participants have a lot of things to ask. Considering the nature of the majority of our audience, it is also expected that they would like to assimilate all the ideas and thereafter think critically about it. Also, the way the erudite speakers have elucidated all the complex ideas for the audience, it really demystified most of the queries. Still, we have a number of interesting questions in our comment box, and I will request my colleague Orkobroto, Ostomi, and Mahadevda to put them before the esteemed speakers. Orkobroto, if you are ready.
Thank you, Jaitroda. So I'll be presenting the questions that have been directed towards Dr. Ananda Purakayastha. So the first question that we have here comes from Abhijit Mondal, and he writes that as you, Ananda sir, have spoken about the monolithic structure in the context of Indianness, that is Indian-ness, and mainstream literature, he has a couple of questions regarding this. The first question is, can literature, even if mainstream or Brahminical, be monolithic ever? And secondly, he wants to know, how do we define nation or Indian-ness with the inclusion of fragments? For they would undoubtedly dismantle the monolithic structure. Dr. Purakayastha, if you can provide the answer to that question.
Yes, thank you for the question. I'm not sure whether I could get the second question clearly. Could you please repeat the second part about the question on nation? How do I define?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah. In the second part, he wants to know, how do we define nation or Indianness with the inclusion of fragments? For they would undoubtedly dismantle the monolithic structure.
Okay. I assume that I could get the second part of the question, but they are what I could see interrelated in that sense, because the first question relates to my argument about mainstream academic literary curriculum being monolithic in the sense that they are not inclusive enough. This is what I exactly wanted to signify, that the syllabi and the curriculum, they have certain majoritarian tendencies in the sense that they cater to certain ideologies, certain cultural blocks, cultural orientations. For example, why do we need 7 to 8 decades to understand that we need to include text from the Northeast or text from other regions of India to include them into the syllabic frame? So that is the first question. The second question is, as the questioner himself asked, that whether literature itself can ever be a monolithic exercise. I love that part of the question, which is a challenging one. That's a good one. Literature, by definition, cannot be monolithic, and I'm not questioning that proposition either. My only submission is that policymakers, when they are deciding upon a particular syllabus, they would select certain representations with certain ideologies in their mind. There are many underrepresented texts. That is the point that I wanted to argue about. It's not about the nature of literature. It's about, I mean, I also do understand that we cannot accommodate all literary texts from all parts of the world. I agree. But within the given complexities of Indian social fabric, you see, the Indian social scenario is so variegated and so heterogeneous that we cannot have unchanged and non-flexible modes of syllabi formation for decades. We need to go for regular changes in the syllabus every decade, preferably, because that will, in a certain way, help in the inclusion of many other texts. For example, I gave the example of my experience of including Dalit studies in the syllabus. It was not easy. I mean, it had to go through a lot of argumentation to include it. We had American studies and Indian studies part of the special paper. When I was a student in North Bengal University, we were offered only either the classics or American literature, a special paper. Part of the reason that we have restricted, restricted provisions and restricted numbers of special papers on offer is that there are fewer number of faculties who would cater to the needs of that. I do understand. But having said that, I would also argue that representations of regional writing and writings from different dispossessed, disenfranchised groups like Dalits and tribal groups and regional groups are grossly underrepresented. So that has to be addressed. That was the problem that I was hammering about. Now, coming to the next part of the question about Indian as well, that is something that will take a lot of time to talk of, but yes, Indianness is something that can be and should be debated, and there are many debates around. I just wanted to suggest that when we talk about the nation, we have certain monolithic ideas of one entity as Indian nation. And in the political corridors, whenever we say anything, people are easily branded as anti-national, seditious. And I'm not saying that out of any, what should I say, mere argumentation, but there are concrete grounds to substantiate my claim. Even Perumal Murugan, whom I refer to, had to face a lot of trouble to justify his literary articulation. In fact, he had to apologize for his book. And then ultimately the Madras High Court had to intervene. So these problems are there in India, and not just in India. There are many. I mean, I was listening to Arunach's wonderful, close study of Achivi's text, and there Arunach was repeatedly referring to the clan question. So the anthropological understanding of nation and imagination, nation and narration, pedagogies of nation, all these things are very complex questions, but these are issues that I just wanted to provoke for young scholars so that they start thinking about it. That's it. I hope I could answer.
Yeah, I believe your answer clears a lot, and I think Abhijit has got his answer. So we have another question from Paramita Dasgupta.
Ananda, this is Arno. May I just intervene for just
Arno, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes.
Ananda, I have just a very small query. In fact, I was listening to your lecture, and you were talking about incorporating the peripheral texts, or rather, for that matter, peripheral authors who are in the periphery to, that students must read them, and their works must be incorporated in syllabi. Now, what also is problematic is the politics of representing these works, because you see that now, as most of the universities, they have started including papers on Northeast literature. I'm talking specifically about Northeast. There are other inclusions like this. So in Northeast literature, you see that there are certain names which keep on circulating, like Mamangdai and like Tensula Ao, but there are other authors, not probably nationally recognized or not because those authors have not received many awards. They remain at the back seat. They are, as you were telling, they are still in the waiting room. So, don't you think that this, award politics and this very issue of who is there at the who is a more recognized author, all these issues also play a very big role when this question of deciding the names of the authors, comes up.
Okay, should I answer to Arnab's question?
Sure, sir.
Yeah, you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arnav, for this intervention. I completely in agreement. In fact, in the early 2020, it was, if I'm not mistaken, in the month of February, that they had a workshop on minor literature at NBU, North Bengal University. And this is exactly the point that I made in my presentation on Navarun Bhattacharya. And I had a discussion with Ranjan there at NBU on these things as well. Diluj referred to the concept of minor literature long back, and now it is good to see that we are taking up these issues in our everyday exercise. But I completely agree with you, Arnav, that this whole business of award-winning authors and including them in syllabus has become a fashion. And I began my talk at NBU February 2020 on minor literature with this quotation from Kabir Suman, and I would like to reiterate that here because that will answer the question that you raised exactly correctly, which is that song from Kabir Suman where he says, Sunil Gangulir diste diste lekha koto kobi more gelo chupi chupi eka eka amaderই জন্য. So this is exactly the case. When Spivak wrote about Mahashweta Devi, academics rushed for Mahashweta Devi, and there were theorizations on Mahashweta Devi. So there are politics of award making, politics of selection, and different ideologies which I kept repeating during my talk today. So there are different contesting ideologies, and these ideologies are always trying to make their presence felt. And that is the problem. And I therefore completely agree with what Arnav said, that when we talk about accommodating or including the peripheral, we have to be on guard. This vigilantism, this academic vigilantism is extremely important. It should not become just a fashion, just to include for the sake of inclusion. That's why I said jokingly, it's politics. Post-colonialism is, after all, a fight for power. Who will hold is actually resettling the power relations, the existing power relations. Status quo should not be maintained. Right now, there are certain hegemonies, there are certain textual hegemonies, narratological hegemonies, theoretical hegemonies. We need to unsettle that. And that process of unsettling those hegemonies will continue. Because who knows, today's peripheral will become tomorrow's hegemony. So therefore, this vigilantism is to be there. And that's why Derrida says that we never arrive. There's never the last word. And that's why there is no presence. We cannot say this is the only peripheral. Because as I said, that today's peripheral will become tomorrow's center. So we have to be on our guard all the time. And we cannot just make it a fashionable habit to say, well, we pay lip service to the question of exclusion and inclusive policies, and therefore we include some of those writers, those award-winning small writers, quote unquote, and then we just end up with that. That is certainly not the objective. The objective and the agenda happens to be that, for example, just to give one example, we have been talking about theory, post-colonial theory, peripherality, marginality, subalternity. I mean, I feel ashamed that only in the year 2018, during my tenure, Fulbright fellowship tenure, that I came to know about the term Africana critical theory by someone called Raylan Rabaka. So I never knew about that, this terminology, Africana critical theory. We have been talking about critical theory with reference to the Frankfurt School, Marxian hypothesis, French thinkers like Derrida, Deleuze, Foucault, etc. But then what about Africa? What about South Asia? So now we are picking up with global South studies. But then again, it shouldn't be a kind of fashion just to speak for the sake of speaking about the global South. The question is, all existing power structures have to be questioned, and even the peripheral can also become very powerful tomorrow. So I completely in agreement with what Arnav said. Thank you.
Okay, so next we have a question from Paramita Dasgupta. And she writes that Shanjukta Madam has spoken about Northeast literature, and you have also pointed towards the necessity of inclusion of Dalit literature and moving beyond the canon, beyond the mainstream literature. But this is a question that can we not say that the inclusion into curriculum or into reading of literature through terms like Dalit and Northeast in the long run can lead to a recreation of the same kind of hegemonic possibility that inclusion of these fragments are trying to dismantle? And if so, how can we escape from this loop? Dr. Purakash,
is it for me? Okay.
Yeah, it's for you.
Okay. Yes, I mean, again, to reiterate what I just said, this is exact, and that's why, if you noticed, I put them within quotes. These are terminologies which are very ideologically loaded. For example, the term delete, the term black, these are problematic terminologies, and we have to be very careful and cautious. For example, currently the standard practice is to use the term African American instead of black. So the term Dalit is no longer restricted to the lower caste people. Post the Dalit Panthers Manifesto, which was published in the 1970s, because they included women, included other precarities like the refugees, the poor people, the workers. So it's kind of dispossessed fraternity in that sense. So I'm again completely in agreement with the fact that we have to be, as I said in my reply to what Arnav said, that we have to be extremely vigilant, extremely careful, because the responsibility is big. The kind of, let me give an example, just one example, then you'll understand. It's the standard practice to say, this is the scholar who worked under my supervision for PhD work. I mean, I changed it. I had to confront this question from certain quarters, that why are you writing, he worked with my supervision. So these are slight changes in the terminologies, pronouns, verbs, that makes a big difference. So these hierarchic models are there, inscribed in various issues. So I agree that we have to be very careful. When I talk about inclusion, the responsibilities are bigger. Who are we to include? I mean, we're just including them with a lot of respect to create a level playing field. It's an equalizer. So it's a level playing field. That is what exactly we have to think of when we are talking about the post-colonial. That's it.
Okay, so I thank Dr. Purakash for answering these questions, but we also have a request for you. Dr. B. Patra has requested for the slideshow PPT. So if you can share that with us, that would be great, Dr. Purakash.
Yes, I will email that to Oshima. No problem.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So I would now like to invite my colleague Mahadev Rai to continue with the session and present the questions that have been addressed to Dr. Shanjukta Chatterjee. Over to you, Mahadev.
Yes, good evening, everybody. And I am giving special thanks to the respected resource speakers for their valuable speech, by which we are profitable, and also the students are very profitable, and they can increase their knowledge on post-colonialism. There are two questions for Shanjukta ma'am. Rajat Singh Mandal wrote that how is Jia's body shaming implicated in the shaming of Northeast as India's other? Is there any intersectionality between body of Jia and body of Northeast? Ma'am.
Yeah. Hello. Actually, I was just thinking of thanking Rajat Mondal for bringing this up. You know, this is something that is very relevant to all literature in every country that is not similar, or that is not um, that does not bear the same features that the so-called powerful mainstream literature of that country bears. For example, when we are talking about, let's say, any of the characters from Northeast, they don't really look the same. And I forget the name of the boy. It just flashed to my mind when I saw the question. I forget Nido Tainam, I think his name was, who was beaten to death. He was from Arunachal. He was beaten to death in Lajpat Nagar market in Delhi in 2015 or 14 or something like that. The year I forget again. But this is something that is always there. And literature is from the lived experience. So I personally have a lot of personal experience of these, body shaming. When like I have traveled all over India, I will not talk about being shamed outside this country, or being taunted outside this country. But in our very own country, I have been a victim. They thought that I was an Assamese, and I was in Mount Abu in the Tibetan market, and they thought that I was an Assamese, and they don't like them. So they were passing comments, and someone interpreted them to me. And I have faced it in my very own state in a long time back. So I know that kind of body shaming that one has to undergo. That kind of apartheid that exists very much. And how is Jia's body shaming implicated? Of course, Jia is the symbol or the representation of everything from the Northeast in that particular novel. So these people in Delhi, okay, they are so they must be like the lady who was sitting in that taxi. She was so, what should I say? She was so used to seeing these people from Northeast moving all around, and kind of taking the spaces up. And it's very true that if you go to places like Dwarka or places like Sarojini Nagar market in Delhi, you see them selling momos and selling various kinds of things. So this is something that is not new, and they were aware of this kind of migration that was happening from Northeast. So the best thing one person can do, to assert his or her supremacy over a particular territory or region, is to say that you don't look like us, you are not one of us. So go back to your country, your desh. Okay, and desh here, amongst us also, among Bengalis also, I've seen this kind of racialist you kind of attitude taken when we talk about desh. So yes, definitely shaming of Jia, calling her, not calling her, I mean telling her to go back to her desh, telling her to go away. This is there in this movement. I can see the question here in the chat box. It is like, is there any intersectionality between body of Jia and body of Northeast? Yes, of course it is there, and that is why this novel has this particular character who is very outspoken and who is a journalist. So I've seen this that when I was I'm talking about, let's say, when I'm talking about Sanjay Hajarika's rite of passage, written in the about the migration in Assam and all. So there also have seen, that is not a fiction, but that actually shows how people are like they take on various appearances to get their purpose solved. But here, why am I bringing in this reference is that Adna had adapted, but Jia was fresh from Northeast. So that portion of that cultural belonging, that ethnic imprint on her that really showed off was very distinct. But in the case of Edna, Edna or Edna, it must have been, kind of mellowed down. And she was more adapted to the Delhiite life, and she was more like one of them. She had become one of them, though the features could not be changed, definitely. But she had become the mannerisms they had taken on. But Jia was fresh, and so Jia is definitely northeast. And this movement of Jia to Delhi is definitely northeast moving into Delhi, and the margin coming to the center. Though I don't like that either, but still that is what is being implied out there.
Thank
Hello?
you, ma'am. Thank you,
Yeah,
ma'am, for your
thank you.
answer. I believe Rajat
Hmm.
Ismandal got the answer. And we have another question for
Yes.
you. Shikha Singh, she
Hmm.
wrote, in the
Hmm.
poems of Mamang Dai that we have in our syllabus, rivers and mountains are presented not as mere geography. What
Yeah.
kind of post-colonial politics is set into motion through such a metaphoric narration?
This is a very interesting question, actually. Even like I think metaphoric narration or symbolism, these are a part and parcel of oral tradition. Okay. And Mamang Dai comes from the Adi tribe that calls them, that's referred to as the Abor tribe, which I mentioned in my lecture. And this oral tradition has this way of, presenting things in a metaphoric or symbolic manner uh, for two reasons, I think. First of all, because language, scripted language, the language that has a mechanized grammatical structure, that language is is somewhere that language is reductive because that language really cannot express all the nuances of existence. I feel that is possible through symbolic utterances. Okay, so when Gimur in Black Hill, yeah, when she connects to the Black Hill in such a way, and this metaphoric presence, of the ravines, the rivers, excuse me, the forest, and everything around her, that becomes a symbol of her existence there. So that is, I think, one aspect of it, and the other one is their connection with nature. So instead of it's a manner of writing also. Post-colonial politics, well, the politics that I would say is definitely the alter way of writing. That is what I feel is there. The altered way of writing. I mean, even me, just I have this habit of when I'm asked to talk, I like taking texts and showing them. That is the standard way I do it. I like this, and I remember once I had to face a question from an established academic who told me on my face that what do you think? We don't know the books. We have never seen the books. Why do you keep showing the books? So I show the books because I think that instead of showing a picture of the book, if I have the book, I like to show the book. So that is my way of doing things. So that way, that personalized thing is there of Mamangdai. But of course, the oral tradition cannot be ruled out. The tradition that is inside her, that has that kind of, a metaphoric way of presentation. These are the two reasons I think that can be put forth. Otherwise, eco-criticism, post-colonial eco-criticism, that can be also an angle which can be read into the entire gamut of things. That can also be done. So I think Shikha Singh, you can perhaps write something on this and mail to me, and maybe I can be enriched by your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your answer. I I am giving thanks to Rajat S. Mandal and Shika Singh for their questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Ashtumi, if you're ready, then you can put the question towards Arnav sir.
Yes. Uh, am I audible?
Yes, you are
Yes, you
audible.
are.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you, all of you here, and it's such a really great pleasure for me to hear from all of you. Uh, Arnav sir, there is a question which I would like to request to you to provide the answer. The questions is asked by Chomodi Chaudhary, and he has said that Arnab sir has referred to the comment made by the white man on the gods as the god of deceit. Readers will of course side with the white man in this context on account of killing of Ikimesuna. This brings a question to my mind that what is Achiev's position in context of culture? I ask this question since post-colonial literature has a political role to serve and Chinua Achebe in his criticism of Conrad's Heart of Darkness did speak of the way the white man thinks lowly of African people and their culture. So, sir, Anup sir,
Yes. Thank you, Astami, for presenting this question. I think Shomodip Chaudhary has asked this question. Now,
yes, sir.
Shomodip, I believe that Chinua Achebe, as a post-colonial writer, he obviously intends to present the point of view of the Igbos because Chinua Achebe, as a writer and as a person, also is a person who belongs to this particular community. Now, what is quite significant is the fact that Achebe, in fact, has not simply highlighted the positive aspects that one finds in this particular community. As a writer, he has also shown quite interestingly the lacks, the problems, right? And let me tell you that Achebe, as a writer, also is very critical. He obviously has written not only Things Fall Apart, but there are two other texts, No Longer at Ease and Arrow of God. These three texts are considered to be Achebe's trilogy. And these texts have been written keeping in mind the condition of the Igbo community, how, as a community, uh, it has responded to the advent of the colonizers. How, as a community, it has in a sense adapted, or whether it has not adapted. In the case of Things Fall Apart, we see that Achebe very importantly shows that the entire community fails to adapt, fails to uh, devise strategies to tackle with the colonizers. So obviously, Achebe is, as a post-colonial writer, uh, very much as a writer, he's representing the point of view of the Igbos. But what is also significant is the fact that he, as a writer, is also very critical. So it's not that he's only showing the positive sides; he's also showing the negative sides. And as in my discussion today, I pointed out that Achebe very importantly shows that these Igbos actually are known, or these Igbos uh, actually have a kind of an identity which is based on this idea of dualism. the idea of dualism, which I pointed out at the very beginning of my lecture today. And the moment this dualism obviously means the relationship between the individual and the spirit, the individual ego and the individual spirit, the individual person and the individual spirit. So the moment this dualism breaks, the moment this dualism in a sense, disintegrates, it disappears. The entire plan, in a sense, falls apart. So, Achebe, therefore, in fact, tries to point out that the Igbo people in Things Fall Apart, they lose their Igbo-ness, they lose their unique identity. The moment they actually disconnect themselves from the so-called their religious religious moodings. So that is something which is very, very important in the context of this particular text. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think all of Shomoji Chaudhary has already represented.
Ashtami, do you have any more questions? Do you have any more questions to be asked to the speakers?
No, ma'am. No, I don't think that I have any question.
Okay, then I think we can move to the final section.
Okay, thank you, Ashimati. I must say that the comment box is pouring with word of appreciation. It was a great honor to listen to the deliberation of our guests. They really took us to the different spectrums of the vast range of post-colonial studies. Now, formally, I should announce this to be the conclusion of the interaction session, but as questioning never stops, we expect that the impact of this webinar will continue to enrich the academic inquiries of all our participants. With this, we have reached the most important part of this program, and it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Sangeeta Das, Head of the Department of English, Ananda Chandra College, to propose the vote of thanks.
So with this, we come to the end of this evening's webinar on non-hyphenated post-colonial studies of literature. Rather, as Professor Arinda Purokaista has rightly suggested, literatures. It has been an immensely enriching and intellectually invigorating seminar, and we owe it all to our erudite speakers, Professor Ananda Chandra College, Dr. Shanjukta Chatterjee, and Professor Arunachal Kumar Sinha. I would like to thank Dr. Devashish Das, Principal, and Dr. Tanma Dr. IQSC Convener of Ananda Chandra College for providing the necessary impetus and support in hosting this webinar. A special mention is reserved for my colleague, Professor Ashima Sharkar, for the entire planning and execution of the webinar. I would also like to thank my other colleagues, Professors Shiv Shankar Chaudhary, Shomik Dashgupta, Jaitra Bharati, Orkobrata Chaudhary, Ashtami Roy, and Mahadev Roy for providing the right kind of support needed to host such a webinar. No less deserving of thanks are our students, without whose enthusiasm and spirited participation the purpose of this webinar would have failed. My final words of gratitude are for all teachers, students, and scholars from other universities and institutions who put forth pertinent questions and added an edge to the event. Finally, hoping that this webinar stimulates us to unravel hitherto unexplored texts of the feeble-voiced or the voiceless, we draw the curtains close. Thank you once again. Thank you all.